It's still hurricane season, despite the fact that we haven't had a named storm here in a minute, but we are watching the potential of that changing.
That's right. I do think we're going to have our next named storm in maybe the next couple days, in fact. So let's talk about it because we are running below average in terms of named storms so far this season, certainly below average in terms of hurricanes. And we will take it, right? Anytime we can talk about a below average hurricane season, we'll count that one as a win. Anything but below average in the East Pack. I mean, the East Pack has been cranking out wave after wave, invest after invest, and we still have Tropical Storm Mario that we're watching. Now, it's Invest 92L here in the Atlantic Basin that we think will be our next named storm. We've got another area to watch that we'll be keeping a close eye on in the days to come. So with Invest 92L, 90% chance of development in the next 2 days in the hatched region that you see here currently, keeping it well north of the Lesser Antilles, and the European model giving us a better than medium chance for seeing a hurricane out of this in the next 10 days, somewhere there around Bermuda. Gabrielle would be the next name if we get a name out of this, which I think we will. And you can see our next tropical wave that we have rolling off the coast of Africa, 20% chance of development in the next 2 days in that. When you have tropical waves, about 20% of those waves actually end up becoming a tropical system. But here's the key stat here. Nearly 85% of all of our major hurricanes that we see actually originate from those waves. I want to show you this really quickly. The low level spin here on Invest 92L. If you have interest in Bermuda, I'd be watching this one pretty quickly. The models are going back and forth on it. The latest European keeps it farther away from Bermuda, but previous runs have taken it closer. So keep a close eye on this forecast. We'll keep you updated on that as well. In the meantime, we're talking tropical rain in other places, Molly, a lot of it recently, but none related to a tropical system, just a lot of heavy rain.
No, this has just been rainy season finally making an appearance in South Florida. Deerfield Beach, the sky's looking a little bit darker here, but not quite seeing the heavy downpours that we were earlier in areas around Miami-Dade County and Broward County. The month-to-date rainfall so far has been impressive.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to get you caught up on the tropics, but you're like, hold on a second. We're looking at the Southwest. Yeah, the East Pack maybe bringing some moisture into California, Arizona, Vegas. We'll keep an eye on you. Over the last 24 hours, some of that has been impacting us in New Mexico. In fact, had a flood report there with some of that moisture kind of going all the way up into Colorado. But here's the thing. This system, this post-tropical Mario, is still spinning off the middle part of the Baja California Peninsula, but the moisture, look where it's going. It's pushing northward. So overall, that is going to enhance our rainfall outlook, which is going to be so great. Obviously, it's definitely needed. The higher moisture content stays down here off the coast of the Pacific, but watch as some of these yellows and greens work up the coastline of Los Angeles, San Diego, maybe going up into Santa Barbara. We could see rain all the way up into Northern California from that moisture surge. So summertime rain doesn't come often, but when it comes, it's going to be nice. When we see a system like this, we have to be mindful of the thunderstorm activity. And that means maybe additional fires. In fact, you could see some of those thunderstorms sitting off the coast of Santa Barbara and Los Angeles this morning, and that's working its way northward. So just be on the lookout. Cloud to ground lightning, again, out here, we don't get it all that often. Don't get me wrong, it happens, but when thunder roars, head indoors, all right? Not much moisture for Arizona and New Mexico currently, but we know that's going to change, especially with the Mogollon Rim. You have an elevation, gain here from Phoenix up into the high country, and that will enhance lift in the atmosphere, which produces more showers and maybe some thunderstorms by the time we get into your day tomorrow. Today, it's all about what happens in California. Tomorrow, we'll see some of these storms spreading up the Sierra Madre and really looking at the Sierra Mountains, maybe seeing some of this as well. Notice it goes all the way up into the Redwoods up there in Northern California. Meanwhile, maybe a little bit more heavy downpours for Arizona coming into the forecast Friday and Saturday, which is going to be great because your monsoon rain gauges have been very, very thirsty. We've had a couple of days here or there that have been somewhat decent, but overall, we're way below average. So there's a big footprint here of where we can see flooding, and that's just because when we see a moisture surge like this, it can produce a good amount of rain in a short period of time. Plus, you have the desert soil, so nothing really seeps into the ground and just piles up, and then it leads to a lot of runoff. That'll be the game going into the end of the week and even into portions of this weekend, maybe picking up a couple of inches. And Jim alluded to the fact that we might even see some more of this going into next week. Over to you, Jim.
Yeah, two tropical systems. 96E is the next one that could become a hurricane. So we'll watch the green out there. Meanwhile, do we have anything that threatens the United States Gulf or East Coast? And the answer is really no. I mean, we kind of had a subtropical storm yesterday, but there's that. We've got a new tropical depression this morning and an area to watch behind that. Let's get into these for you. I'm going to be honest with you. This new depression isn't much to look at. I'm kind of surprised it's actually a depression. I won't lie. It's very elongated still. It's still got shear, even though most of the shear is up in here. It just doesn't look like much. And even it was kind of interesting reading the description. Well, we kind of saw something on the scatterometer winds, but we had to use the convection to denote where we have it. So if you look at this visible this morning, you kind of get the idea there's a little twist maybe right there, but it's pretty elongated and lopsided. So all the convection still on the east side of it and way to the north. It doesn't look very good right now, just to be honest with you. As we talked about, a lot of the shear on the northern side of this. The farther south we go, we virtually run into no shear over the center, but we also run into no convection. You remember yesterday I showed you that big water vapor image. Look at all the dry air. So this is 500 millibars. This is 18,000 feet. In the tropics, you're going to get thunderstorms that go up to 18,000 feet. So this is all entrained in the mix and through here, and you can see where the center is. Guess what? It's got to move through some of that. So I don't know how this even develops, frankly, as we work our way through the next 24 to even 48 hours. We'll see. Anyway, by the weekend, it looks like it's going to try and get its act together. All the guidance kind of has at least the end of the cone. This will change. This was the GFS initiation. So now that they have a center, they can initiate it there, and then the models will go and be much better after that. So typically, you get a high-pressure system around the peak of the season that looks like this. So everything has to travel in this fashion. And that's why, you know, we're threatened a lot by these Cabo Verde storms during the peak of the season. This year, and certainly as we move towards September 30th, Jibbo, back step that for me one, if you would. This year, and certainly as we head toward the end of the month, our high kind of settles a little bit farther east. Remember, we've been talking about how much larger the high was, okay, and a lot of the sinking air. So we've really kind of shut down the MDR. And now what is typically average is going to continue likely through the end of the month and certainly in toward October, where we don't even start looking out through here anymore. So we've got the dry air, we've got the stability. What does this system do? What does the first system do? Here's a look at the European. You can see our TD7 heading up towards Bermuda. And it's going to be about that time if it's going to blow up. It's going to do that before it gets there. So this will be something to watch, even though a lot of the latest guidance, especially Euro and Google DeepMind, have it east. So we're on what we call the clean side of the system. Notice we don't see much associated with the second one down below. Let's use circles for both of these. And of course, I'm running out of time. All right, so here's the GFS, which actually has the system farther south. And it doesn't have much at all down and through here, maybe this. But either way, after this system here, that's just going to be Gabrielle, there's not much to look at still.
Which could impact Minnesota and the Dakotas going into the end of the week. We stay busy all across the plains, Steph.
That we do, but let's head to the tropics and talk about how for the first time in essentially 3 weeks, it's been 20 days that we have a development of a system. And remember, this is the peak of hurricane season, so it's very odd that we haven't gotten anything to develop. It's not that odd because of the conditions we've had out there with all the subsidence and the shear and still a lot of that dust out there. So tropical depression number 7 and an area to watch. So the question is, where is the center of circulation on this? Jim, do you want to come do this? I mean, he was like going nuts about it.
Listen.
Is it up here?
If you put the visible up, yes, it's closer to where your finger is. If you show the visible, it looks like it's much farther north. But because I don't see any kind of a circulation down
here where they say it is.
13.7 north, 45.9. It's more like 19.5 north. Anyway.
Oh, I was just doing like voicing over your voice.
I think I've done this just too much. I got to put it down.
Anyhow, yes. So where exactly is the circulation? That is key for the development, because if that center of circulation is way far north, that's going to make a huge difference in the modeling and what happens with the system and where it goes and yada, yada, yada. It's all very widespread right now for us. And we do have some dry air that it's dealing with. We do have some of that shear that it's dealing with as well. And some 40, 50 knot shear there on the north side, which is pretty intense. So the question is it centered here or is it centered much higher than that? So that until you get that good, well-known circulation center, this goes for any storm. The forecast is very hard to do, so keep that in mind. Right now, it's expected to become a hurricane as we head Saturday night into Sunday. And then we have our next system that will be following. This one we're not too concerned about right now. There's a visible of it showing the clouds on the Cabo Verde Islands. But we want to focus on our first one. All the models are picking up this system and spinning it towards Bermuda, but taking a right-hand turn before it actually hits Bermuda. And then you can see these other waves coming off and not much come of it. The GFS was all sorts of whacked out early this morning, now trending more towards the GFS and heading a little bit farther north. Of course, there's still plenty of the season to go here. Don't forget, you can get a lot of big storms in October, and we've had a lot of them in the past.
He said, we interviewed him, and that's exactly what he said.
But when you go chop a tree down, if you need to, like in your backyard, you can say it. All
Okay,
right?
I
Just
will.
make sure you record it for us. All right, let's go to Southern California here. Hey, we've got summertime rainfall. LA, Santa Barbara. We're seeing it back in Palm Desert. We've got it all the way right there on the border of Kingman, Arizona. Some of this is going to move up to Las Vegas. So here we go. We're going to have a wet day today as we've got all this moisture from coming in from that old tropical cyclone Mario. Heaviest rain is definitely in the deserts of California. That's working its way northward. Barstow is an area that's got a lot of desert soil associated with it. So that yellow color you see here, the longer it lasts, the easier it's going to be for us to flood. We've got nice soaking rain up and down the SoCal coastline. So the flood watch does extend into the deserts of Arizona, but most of it will be focused into, let's say, Fresno Valley. I mentioned you in Barstow, back into Palm Springs as we head into today. We've got no flash floodings this morning, but that could change, all right? The deepest moisture is definitely down here. This is a new system with Invest 96E, but Mario, the old moisture associated with it, is beginning to send higher moisture in the atmosphere northward, and that's going to go all the way up the central and northern coastline of Arizona. You could even feel that air mass change in Phoenix or Gilbert if you're waking up there this morning and down into Tucson, and that's slowly working its way up into Las Vegas. So you're dry now. You'll step outside and be like, man, it feels kind of humid out here. And that's because we're seeing that southerly flow and all that is stretching north. I-15, I-10, I-8. Careful on your commute this morning. It's been a while since we've seen some good rainfall. Lots of oil buildup, which can increase our wrecks and our accidents, okay? Nothing right now around Phoenix, but due west we have it across, again, that I-10 corridor. And just notice how this thing will head northward. Now, that means we can maybe see some scattered storms around the Saguaro State and back into New Mexico. Look at the coverage this afternoon in Vegas. That'll slide up the Great Basin. But again, the center point or the focal area will be what's rotating up near Napa Valley and eventually going all the way up, maybe impacting Reno, the east slopes of the Sierra Madre Mountains, which could be interesting. Meanwhile, we'll still be seeing scattered thunderstorms across northern Arizona and maybe up towards the Grand Canyon. So this is definitely good. We obviously need it here, Stephanie. It'd be nice if we see more of this as we get ready for the wintertime around the horizon.
Yeah, what's been nice is that the tropics have been pretty quiet, and we haven't had a lot threatening us here in the lower 48. So that's been quite nice. We do have two areas to watch, Tropical Storm Gabrielle, and then an area behind it. And in fact, these are the thunderstorms from the yesterday's system area to watch. That has just gone kaput. And then this is actually the area to watch. The circle's a little off here, but it should be right there with those clouds and thunderstorms coming off of Africa. Now, Tropical Storm Gabrielle right now at 50 miles an hour. That's what our winds are at. Wouldn't be shocked if this went down before it goes up because it's just getting ripped apart by shear. I mean, look at this thing. Does this look even healthy to you? It's just this huge mass of clouds, not even loads of convection around it. We have our visible satellite up, and you can now see where the center of circulation is located. As we get a little bit closer in, you see that counterclockwise spin, but this all needs to tighten up. But it's totally exposed. All this thunderstorm activity, that needs to all wrap around this and come into a nice tight low pressure in order to strengthen. But it's having a hard time doing that with all of the dry air that we have in place and that shear that is still over the area, at least 30 knots of shear, which is just blowing it over and not allowing it to develop. As I mentioned, would it be shocking if this went down in strength with everything that is fighting right now? As we head into our Sunday to Monday, that's when it looks like this will be a hurricane, our second hurricane of the year. 75-mile-an-hour winds, that's your minimal hurricane. It looks like it'll skirt to the east of Bermuda, but Bermuda will still feel the waves. And even Puerto Rico, and as you head into some of those other islands, let's think about some. Having a mental block on my islands, even though I've been to those islands in the northern part of the Lesser Antilles there next to us here. St. Croix, that's one. You could get some of the wind action, which will kick up the waves as well. So here's a look at the wind models, and notice some of the models have this coming up a lot faster than others. So how much it can hang together with what it's dealing with now will be a real telltale sign if this thing can strengthen. It's all going around a high pressure. That's what we've seen with all these systems. And so it's going to go around the periphery, the western periphery of our high pressure. And so does it go exactly over Bermuda? Well, the question is, this high pressure, is this super strong? Is this super weak? That's going to push the storm a little bit farther, a little bit closer. So this hatched area should be a little bit farther over here. This is that next wave that has the potential for development. And that's what all this cloud cover is. This is our next system. The other one right there that was going over the Cabo Verde, that has not really a good chance of development. There's system number 1, that's system number 2, and then this is number 3 with that wave. This has the most decent chance of being our next system to watch.
When hurricane hunters flew into it a little bit earlier on in the day, Sunday, and of course they found strong enough winds, 75-mile-per-hour winds, so it's about as low grade of a hurricane as you can get, but it is going to strengthen as it moves up toward the north. The thing is, there's actually some really warm water that it's about to move over, so you may remember this. It was a couple of days ago. It was a big controversy kind of when the Hurricane Center called this a tropical storm when it was a little farther off toward the southeast. Either way, you know, we could sit there and argue about that all day, but it doesn't matter. We knew the forecast was for it to become a tropical cyclone. It became a tropical storm. And then, of course, it has progressed into its hurricane stage now. So Hurricane Gabrielle, again, 75-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving toward the north-northwest. So the big story with this was always what is going to happen with Bermuda. And luckily, the latest trends are really looking like they're a lot of the models are taking the storm pretty well east of Bermuda. But a well put together circulation now. You got a lot of thunderstorms around the middle of it. You can see that pretty well on the infrared satellite. A little bit on the raggedy side, kind of on the southeast side of the storm. Not quite as symmetrical as a really well put together hurricane. We're going to show you one of those actually in just a minute. There's one going on in the West Pacific, just an absolute monster. They call it typhoon over there. It's a super typhoon, actually, so hang on for that one. That's coming up in just a couple of minutes, but I do want to give Gabrielle its due. Visible satellite imagery does tend to tell the story a little bit better. Of course, the sun has gone down way out there in the Atlantic, so this is from just a little bit earlier. But what you can see is thunderstorms wrapping around a center. This is what I always talk about, what we're looking for when a storm is in a strengthening phase or whether it's a tropical cyclone or not. And even though, you know, it doesn't look all that great on the southeast side of it, we do have some pretty solid thunderstorms in there. Now, to give you perspective, where's Bermuda here? All right, Bermuda is this tiny little island right here. And they've been through it before with hurricanes. They've had direct hits. You know, it happens from time to time, not terribly often, but it's such a small island that it's so hard to get the exact center of one of these storms to actually get there and make landfall. The other thing with Bermuda is that they're super well prepared for tropical systems compared to other places. They have really done a nice job with preparation for that. So the environment here with Gabrielle, as we zoom on out, what you'll see is not a whole lot of wind shear in the immediate kind of future here for Gabrielle as it moves up toward the northwest. There is a little bit, but compared to some other storms, what they've encountered over the last couple of months, this isn't really that bad. I mentioned the sea surface temperatures are very warm, and again, here's that little spot out there in the ocean where you have some of the stronger or some of the higher sea surface temperatures, which feeds more fuel into the storm. Keep in mind, with tropical cyclones, they feed directly off of the water, right? They get their energy from the heat of the water. Very different than a storm system that's moving across the country, a storm that's over land, something like that. So it is going to strengthen here. I think we'll probably have a Category 2 passing about 200 miles or so east of Bermuda over the next day, and then it just basically turns out toward the east. Becomes a problem for Western Europe down the road, as is usually the case with a lot of these systems. But again, it's moving northwest right now. We've watched this play out a couple different times with different storms so far this year, where we've been in a really nice setup here, at least as far as the lower 48 is concerned, where we've had a lot of troughs coming off of the east coast of the U.S. That acts like a shield. So, you know, the other thing that's been in play is the Bermuda High, in general, so far this year has been kind of farther toward the east than other years, right? So if it's farther out toward the east, that big clockwise spin around it tends to steer storms off toward the north before they reach the east coast of the U.S. Let's say the high was a little bit farther toward the west, like directly over Bermuda, then the steering of the storm would look more like that. and then we'd have to worry about it along the east coast of the U.S. So this is a good thing. It has migrated farther west than where it was over the last few weeks, but it's still in the spot where it's helping us out with getting steered off toward the north before it's a problem for the U.S. In fact, this one's getting steered off toward the north, quickly enough that it's probably not even going to be too much of a problem for Bermuda. But look at this. Latest forecast does have a Category 3 storm. Let's go out to the cone. It'll be Cat 2 or Cat 3, something like that. And it's a very brief window here that it has. You saw that sea surface temperature map. Once it's over that, it's not over that warm water for very long. But while it is over that water, that's where it's going to do its most significant amount of strengthening before it starts to lose some strength as it gets over some cooler water. And then we'll have to watch here out toward the Azores, part of Portugal, by the way, if you're not familiar with that area. Beautiful place, by the way. Beautiful place to vacation, from what I hear. I've never been there, but I've seen videos. A lot of forecast model agreement here. I mean, I could show you a lot of different versions of this, but this is the GFS ensemble, so a lot of different runs of the GFS model. With some different initial conditions. Same deal with the European, and they're all right on top of each other. They're all well east of Bermuda. And I know this kind of looks like it's a little bit of a close call with Bermuda, but trust me, this is actually not going to be that big of a deal overall. So that's the story with Gabrielle. Let's move on to that monster storm in the West Pacific that I was talking about. I'm talking about Super Typhoon Ragasa. Yeah, there's been a buzz about this one on social media. Barreling into the northern part of the Philippines. It looks like Luzon Island is going to avoid a direct hit from this one, but you got some islands here that are just north of Luzon. They're called the Babuyan Islands. You got a couple storm chasers that are out there, and it's going to be interesting watching their Twitter feeds over the next couple of days because honestly, I'm a little bit worried. I mean, this is a monster of a super typhoon. Now, I don't want this to get too confusing. Hurricane and typhoon, it's literally the exact same thing. It's the same storm. It's just that they call it something different in the West Pacific. They got the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, the JTWC, and they're the ones that handle that over there. So look at the size of this thing and just how far from the center of the thunderstorms extend. The thing that I really wanted to point out here is I think this is probably the best example of just a textbook eye wall replacement cycle that I've ever seen. You'll hear us throw that around sometimes. Hey, this storm, it looks like it's going through an eye wall replacement right now. Well, if you never knew what that meant, pay attention to this because this is the best example of it that you'll ever see. So a storm will have an eye, right? Everybody knows what that is. There's your eye wall. And then sometimes it will actually replace itself. So what you'll see is this outer eye wall develop. So something like this right here. So you start to see kind of a wider eye-like feature develop, but you've still got your inner eye wall that's intact. But watch what happens to the two of these. The inner eye wall here is going to kind of die down, fade away. And then this one on the outside, the outer eye wall here, is going to take over as the main eye. What makes this so unique is usually during the eye wall replacement cycle, for at least several hours, the storm kind of looks a little raggedy, right? Or the eye doesn't look all that symmetrical. With this one, it comes out almost perfectly symmetrical. I mean, for maybe an hour or two, it didn't look all that great. But what happens is the wind field also expands when you go through an eye wall replacement cycle. You notice the size of the eye also much larger than the initial one. So let me just go through this really, really slowly for you, and I'll actually zoom in a little bit more. So here it is. About halfway through the eye wall replacement cycle, you can see the inner eye wall starts to die down, and then this one is going to take over as the main eye. Watch this. Isn't that something else to actually see that happen in real time? And again, this is over the last several hours that this happened. Then it looks a little raggedy for a little bit, and now it's almost perfectly symmetrical now. So, man, that is absolutely spectacular. But again, the Babuyan Islands here north of Luzon, there are close to 20,000 people that live there. So this is going to be a very, very big deal, I would say. By the way, let me show you the cone on this, and I'm going to show you another storm that's just northeast of here. The West Pacific can produce some absolutely monster storms, and they certainly have over the years. But look at this. It gets out into the South China Sea, and then it's going to be a problem for Hong Kong, parts of China, Southeast Asia, etc. So we'll keep you updated with the impacts from that. Let's go to the wide view here because there's actually another really strong typhoon, not as strong as Ragasa. This one is called Niguri. Okay, so this is what it looks like a little bit closer up. Again, not quite as well put together, but it's another very powerful storm. I mean, it's tough to compare one to Ragasa, which is the one that we just looked at. By the way, you may have noticed, I'm going to go back down to Ragasa here for a second. So back to the first storm that I was talking about. You may have noticed that on the banner here, I intentionally put in Nando. So again, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, they put out the name Regasa, and then the Philippines themselves, they actually will take their own name, or they'll make their own name for the storm. And I figured it was important to put that on there, Nando, because of the fact that the storm is literally hitting the Philippines. All right, back to the mainland U.S. we go. Let's talk about severe weather.
What a story there. And this week will be a year since Hurricane Helene tore a devastating path from North Florida right on up through much of Georgia into South Carolina and then there into western North Carolina. It's almost a two-part storm because the heavy rain threat, that's what produced that horrific flooding that we had, especially in the mountains of western North Carolina. But there was a major wind damage concern. It's like a buzzsaw as it worked its way up through Georgia, up into Augusta, and even there around Greenville. Over 250 deaths, 176 direct in 7 states. That makes it the deadliest hurricane in the continental U.S. since Katrina. 95 deaths by inland flooding. Steph, look how much more that surpassed than the actual surge itself. And that's what's so notable about Helene was the far-reaching impacts inland. I mean, places that usually don't deal with, hurricane force winds.
Every time there's a landfalling tropical entity, they are not just coastal systems. And we want to emphasize that again as we look at the tropics. We have Hurricane Gabrielle. We have 2 areas to watch. So let's get into it. Gabrielle right now, 90-mile-an-hour winds, a Category 1 storm. It's moving north-northwest at 10 miles an hour. But it is going around the periphery of a high pressure, and it is going to get taken over by southwesterly winds. And so that's going to help push this system off to the east. As it does so, it'll eventually lose strength. But before it does that, it looks like it'll gain strength. It will get into an environment that's a little more conducive for development, go just to the east of Bermuda, and then encounter wind shear and dry air as it races off to the east for us. Even though it's going east, it is still propagating waves out to the west. And that means that we do have rip current issues essentially up and down the entire Atlantic coast. So what are the models showing us? That is Gabrielle. And then we have 2 areas that we are watching here in the Atlantic. There's our first area where it looks like that one will be a little weaker. There's our second area to watch. That one's expected to become a little stronger. This is a look at the European model. But notice this is still bringing clouds and showers here to the Bahamas. And then it does look like it will stay offshore, maybe bringing some clouds and some rain into Florida, while our other system looks like it has a chance to become a named system. This is a look at the GFS. There's 2 other areas that we are watching. The first one coming through, there's your second one. And notice the GFS wants to go a little harder with this first one that's coming through and not as well defined with the second. Now the GFS has not been performing well this season, so we tend to really lean towards the Euro. The next couple names on the list, Humberto and also Imelda. Now, as we look in the Western Pacific, we have a beast. This is equivalent to a Category 5, the typhoon that went through the Philippines for us here, and it will continue its trek westbound. Notice it's going to start to lose some of its strength, thankfully, and it is still going to be quite strong, though, when it does potentially come ashore again as perhaps a Category 2 or equivalent Category 2 hurricane. So this is one to watch, as it has been very powerful already.
Under that severe thunderstorm warning until 8:45 a.m. local time. So there's a look at the travel impacts today. We've got a lot of energy, Kelly, coming out of the Rockies. So several airport delays anticipated by the afternoon into the evening, and then also this morning in DFW and across portions of the Ohio River Valley.
Yeah, plenty of storms as we close out the summer season with fall beginning this afternoon. It's still very much hurricane season, by the way. We've got a few things that we're watching, including Hurricane Gabrielle, which is rapidly intensifying as we speak, and a tropical storm over on the eastern Pacific side as well. But we begin with Gabrielle, now a major hurricane, the second one of the season. As you can see, 120-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving north at 10 miles per hour. We've seen a significant pressure drop going from the 970s now down to 957. And the eye clearly popping out in the middle of our satellite imagery. You can see from our visible satellite pictures, basically like taking pictures from space, you can actually see a well-developed hurricane right now. Even though it was struggling when it was first beginning here across the Atlantic basin, it has really taken off. And thankfully, not directly impacting Bermuda, likely to stay well to the east with 125-mile-per-hour winds through tomorrow morning, and then eventually traversing the Atlantic and speeding up as it goes toward the east. But yes, for Bermuda, Indirect impacts, we're talking higher surf. There will be some elevated rip current risk as well, not just in Bermuda, but even up and down the Atlantic side of the East Coast. You've got the red from Long Island down to New Jersey, even all the way down to eastern Florida. Then we've got these areas to watch. In the Atlantic Basin, this is 20% next couple of days, 70%, so a high chance that this could become our next tropical depression or storm once it gets closer to the islands, but staying north of the islands. And then we've also got one that's actually closer to the islands. This first one has a 10% next 2 days, 40%, so a medium chance going through the next week or so. So let's follow the systems here. This is the Euro showing Gabrielle, first of all, moving well to the east of Bermuda. System number 1, according to the Euro, kind of bringing it north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, keeping an eye on this one, which has it organizing a little bit better in time, as you can see by next Friday, possibly a storm or a hurricane. And we've got this other system that we're still watching, mind you, but it's going to be slow to develop as it works its way through the Bahama Islands. Now, the American model, a little bit different here. Of course, you've got Gabrielle going east of Bermuda, but keep an eye on these systems down through here. First one looks a little more robust as it goes just to the north of Puerto Rico. You can see the reds and oranges, a little bit more of an area of spin, if you will. And then that one actually heads just along the east coast of North Carolina. We've got plenty of time to watch it. Next name on the list is Humberto.
Given the rapid intensification of Hurricane Gabrielle, that it is taking that path farther eastward away from Bermuda.
So here we go. This is major hurricane, category 3, Gabrielle, 120 miles per hour. And you're thinking, wait, yesterday, this was a somewhat unhealthy looking tropical storm. This has changed dramatically in less than 24 hours.
Now it's like a picture perfect hurricane, basically.
Right.
When we've talked about Gabrielle in the past several days, the word for it has been disorganized this whole time up until yesterday.
And there's a view satellite. You can see some of the wind speeds there. Hamilton, Bermuda, not really being affected by the wind speeds. Waves, I think a different story. Obviously, you have a big storm like that. It's gonna turn up some rough surf.
Yeah, you're gonna have some of those rough waves, high surf, maybe a little bit of beach erosion, all of that. But we're expecting Gabrielle to continue kind of off to the east-northeast. It does stay a hurricane until the end of this week by this forecast, despite the cooler water it's going to be interacting with.
So gradual weakening over the next couple of days. How about these 2 additional areas to watch that are also in the Atlantic? Let's start with the higher chance. This one has an 80% chance of development over the next 7 days.
And the other tropical wave that we're watching, kind of one right beside the other, this is the one that we're going to keep a closer eye on for the U.S. So,
well, here we are on this Monday, finding ourselves in a brand new season. Happy fall, everyone. But also, the hurricane season seems to be waking up a little bit as well. This is Weather Unfiltered. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson, our hurricane expert. Dr. Rick Knapp, you've got a lot on your plate, not just on this side of the world.
No, this is one of the times of year, September in general, where the tropics worldwide can be active. Now, it hasn't been that way all of this month, but we kind of knew with how warm those waters are. We don't have an El Nino. We couldn't keep the entire month of September down.
That's why I hate the song by Earth, Wind, and Fire, because it's about, what, the 21st day of September? I don't like it. That's why, because of the hurricanes. It's like a little, it's stressful.
I feel you. I understand.
I mean, top 5 most hated songs.
Maybe they need to, Earth, Wind, and Fire's not happy with us right now, but maybe they could do in October.
Well, they need to do like the first day of December where there's no more hurricanes and it's over, maybe, hopefully, and it's almost Christmas.
Yeah,
that sounds nicer than September.
Then it's really cold.
All right, Dr. Knapp, we'll get you in April. We'll get you in June.
Whatever you need, we're there for you, right? We certainly know, though, past Septembers have proven to be very problematic along the East Coast, along the Gulf, honestly, anywhere in the basin, right? You go back to Hurricanes Hugo and Ivan, just 2 examples of hurricanes that made significant impact during this month.
It was 1989 when Hugo hit Charleston. That left 80 people dead, $8 to $10 billion in damage. And then in 2004, we all remember Ivan. This one brought nearly 13 feet of surge when it pounded Escambia Bay. That was in the Pensacola area. So, Dr. Knapp, we are looking at where we normally see named storms this year, and you're noticing a common theme here.
Yep, and the 2 storms that you all just mentioned were of the variety that formed relatively quickly in the East Atlantic, and they were long-track hurricanes. They aren't all that way. In fact, we're talking a lot this week about last year's Hurricane Helene, which formed in the Western Caribbean and then struck within a matter of just a few days. So sometimes waves like this that haven't developed, even by the time they get to the Central Caribbean, can be among the most troubling when they form close to land. And that is the concern, especially of this first tropical wave. We'll talk about this next one in just a little bit. And we'll also look at Gabrielle, which is a beast of a hurricane. But this wave that's just east of the Caribbean, late tonight and tomorrow could bring some gusty winds and locally heavy rain to the northeastern Caribbean, Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands, and then Puerto Rico, say tomorrow and tomorrow night. Hispaniola could deal with some heavy rainfall and doesn't have much chance developing in the near term, but over the next 7 days, Hurricane Center's still at that 50-50 shot over the really warm waters that aren't just what Gabrielle just feasted off of, but they extend well westward all the way into the Gulf, and everything is above average. So no lack of fuel. But there is a lack of consistency in the models in terms of where this system could eventually go. The Euro model, current run, latest one has it going into the Carolinas. And that's about a week from now, but it takes more than a week to get to Florida if you believe the previous run. So there's a complex upper level pattern that makes the track and strength of this eventual possible depression or storm very difficult. Especially when they haven't formed yet, getting the track and intensity is very difficult. But the next couple of days, it's going to struggle because of wind shear. This upper level low north of Puerto Rico is going to hinder it, but that's going to allow it to stay weak and shallow and go farther and farther to the west. Then the troughing pattern that's been in place over the eastern U.S. for weeks and weeks is going to remain in place. And we're going to have another cutoff low over the southeast that's going to interact with this wave, it looks like, eventually. And that could have a big impact on where it goes and how strong it is. Colors of the low-level spin doesn't get much better organized the next couple of days, but you get north of Hispaniola, you get away from land interaction, and the upper-level low starts to go away. Then we start to get upper-level high pressure. The conditions get more conducive for development as it moves northwestward near or over the Bahamas late this week. And then there's that trough. And this latest run, the upper-level pattern, it cuts off south of this main trough up to the north, and that brings it northward to North Carolina in about a week, but it also captures it. Maybe it stalls over the mid-Atlantic. Could that be a rainfall-induced flood problem? But that's just one of many possible scenarios. And don't just look at the latest runs and compare all the models. Got to see what the previous runs have been doing. This is the previous run of the Euro, which does most of the same things until about Saturday. And then after that, the troughing to the north exits a little more quickly, and this cutoff low sets up a little farther south and west, and this gets trapped along with that cutoff low south of the eastern ridge this weekend. It doesn't go north, it goes west into that cutoff low south of that new ridge. That would bring it into Florida. So a lot of possibilities, and if you look at the GFS, there's another example. It doesn't really get it going hardly at all, and then this troughing in the east just brings a front that kind of captures the system, and it never reaches land. That's also a possibility. My goodness. Now, we know from history that this area to watch in the last week of September, this zone, this time of year, can have a lot of squirrely tracks once a system forms in or near this area. Look at the couple of looping storms. Here's Hurricane Jean of 2004 that looped and went into Florida. Here is Hurricane Joaquin that looped around and went back to the northeast. And some of these systems have dissipated or not even made landfall. And then when you look at other storms that have formed farther east and come into this zone, there's some notorious East Coast impacts. If this gets its act together, could the East Coast be affected, Mid-Atlantic and Northeast? And one last example to show, this formed in early September in 1971 and became Ginger well east of Bermuda. Then it looped around and made it all the way back to a landfall in North Carolina. I show all of that, Mike, to exemplify how this time of year in this part of the Atlantic, there are all kinds of weird tracks that can happen. So don't be surprised if this misbehaves in a big way.
All right, we're not done talking about the Atlantic Basin there, though. Hurricane hunters getting more info on Hurricane Gabrielle. This is the view from the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron here, going right through that beast. Man, that is a view, isn't it? Impressive stuff. And then they'll cut right through the, it looks like they're going through the eye, and then they'll cut right through the eye wall.
And the video makes it seem so smooth.
It does,
and
right?
gentle, but it is not.
Well,
that kind of
in
ride.
the eye, they're doing okay, right?
But man, when you come out of that eye, there's a big jolt and you're going downward. And then when you hit the other eye wall, you're going up and it is a jolt.
You know what? It's just like the barf bag is like on standby, and the seatbelt is tight, super tight. Right?
I would need all kinds of medications and restraints to survive that. But kudos to those folks who do that.
All right, so let's talk about Gabrielle. You take a look at it from Bermuda's radar. It is very impressive.
Yeah, so very good thing that they're not getting the full brunt of this significant, strong Category 4 hurricane. 2 hurricanes so far in the Atlantic Basin, 1 Cat 5, 1 Cat 4, and they've all been north of the main development region. So not every hurricane season involves the long-tracked Ivans and Irmas that are farther to the south. Warm waters between the Caribbean and Bermuda really have fueled a beast of a hurricane that is going to head toward the Azores, maybe still as a hurricane, and how strong and large of an extratropical system could affect Western Europe.
Could be a big windstorm for them, right? Waves are going to be an issue for Bermuda, especially on the east side of the island, but you're still worried about rip currents on the east coast.
Yeah, through tomorrow, North Carolina northward, some swells, high surf, rip currents are going to be an issue. We've lost lives on the east coast in past storms that were the other side of Bermuda. Then we got to look to the southeast. We've already talked about wave number 1, but wave number 2 here, this has the best chance of going in the same general zone as Gabrielle with an 80% shot of developing.
So what's going on in the atmosphere or the water here that makes this so likely?
This is in a zone where, again, the upper level winds are generally conducive. And you see how this first wave is interacting with an upper level low, but this next wave is going to have a lot of upper level outflow. Weak wind shear because you got a ridge to its north. There's no trough digging down to bring mid-latitude westerlies or an upper level low. So that is going to mean it's going to be moving pretty slowly. It's going to have favorable conditions. The only thing, and you mentioned this before, Mike, is that could it run into some of the water that's slightly cooled off by Gabrielle, but I don't think it's going to cool off to the point where there's no fuel.
And it's conceivable here in the models that we could have 2 storms side by side at the same time.
Yeah, and this one could be a particular slow mover, and it could jog around, and there's at least a possibility, one of the many possibilities, that Bermuda does get the full brunt of that.
Well, it's a very fortified island, near miss now with Gabrielle, but it'd be heads up on the next one. But this could just meander as well.
It could. And if the GFS is right, maybe it struggles a little more to develop. I just don't believe this particular model run. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense given the current structure and the overall pattern. But when a global model looks at a tropical wave and kind of shrugs its shoulders, you have to at least allow for the possibility that it doesn't develop. And remember, the Hurricane Center is giving it an 80% shot. They're not saying 100%. So both of these systems, these 2 tropical waves, are entering a part of the Atlantic Basin that's going to have a very complex upper level pattern. But like you said, if this next one develops, it could meander near or south of Bermuda for more than the next week.
And those are hard to forecast then where the eventual path will go. I mean, it could go literally 180 degrees in either direction, right?
Yeah, those are the kinds of scenarios that can produce the 1,000-mile track forecast errors. You forecast it to recurve, and you forecast it to be in Europe, and it's still sitting down here. So the point being that these 2 systems have a significant chance to work together to at least bring some swells to the east coast of the U.S., but that western wave, could that make a landfall in the U.S.?
All right, we're keeping a very close eye on all that. Dr. Nab, thank you very much. Also, plenty of...
In the Northeast, we have some lighter rain, a few thunderstorms in the Mid-Atlantic. That might be where we see the biggest issues, Jim, as this stuff comes in between, say, 4 and 6 p.m.
A couple of days of active weather up there. All right, speaking of active, let's check out the tropics here, where we have now 2 new invests this morning. Hurricane Gabrielle, which just blew up over the weekend, rapidly intensified into yesterday and continues to advance now off to the northeast pretty quickly as a 140-mile hurricane. Look what it's done to the east coast. Lots and lots of rip currents in through here, so please stay out of the water. If you live or know someone in the Azores, population about 240,000 people here, we're going to have a pretty powerful storm coming at us early Friday morning right through the heart of the Azores. So something to watch, and then over toward Portugal and Spain as whatever this becomes leftover-wise as we get in toward the latter part of the weekend. So let's keep an eye on it. Then notice what we have here, a lot closer to home, 2 invests farther south and west than most of the stuff that we've dealt with all year. Nothing or either one of these is organized here, but I wanted to take note of 94, because 94L is the NVEST number, it's a lot closer to home. All right, so should we have to deal with that, we're within a week of potential impacts if we have to deal with it. All right, 93 first, which is the eastern system, higher probabilities at 80%, 94 at 50%. We'll see what NHC does at 8 a.m. with their update in terms of the probabilities. But already, you know, with our 94, we've got showers and thunderstorms this morning through the islands. Now, this only shows an inverted wave in through here, and typically with waves, you get most of your action on the eastern side of these. So this is par for the course, but nothing has organized with this yet. All right, so here's 94. I got to try and remember these. And here's 93 here. All right, let's see what the model does. This is the European model, but I like the solution enough to show it to you. All right, so the key is look what happens over the Great Lakes. You see this ridge starting to build here? So these systems may be far enough west so that at least one of them, at least 94, gets trapped. And whatever it is at this point, now that we have NVEST numbers, we'll find out, you know, more in terms of strength. We'll get planes out here to investigate it and things like that. We may find a channel to bring this close to the United States. The other thing is we will have kind of the leftovers of an old front kind of sitting down in through here too. So that could be a factor in some of this. And then 93, it looks like we'll head east, but is Bermuda in play finally with one of these? All right, so all things to watch. So here's 93, I'm sorry. Here's 94 in through here. So both of these, certainly up here, of course, this is Gabrielle. We got to watch 94.
Well, certainly looking forward to that. Meantime, the Atlantic is red hot with activity. We got a hurricane, a tropical storm, and an invest that we're watching. More Fox with the First right after this. It is so good to see you with us right here on Fox with the First on your 25th day of September. I'm Michael Lesman.
Yeah, it's Thursday, or like we say, Friday Eve. Thanks for spending part of the morning with us. I'm Craig Herrera. We do want to get into the tropics. It is very active out there as well. We've been talking about the tropics going on. We've got 3 areas that we're watching currently in the Atlantic, and then we're also watching one in the Eastern Pacific. But really, 2 named systems and 1 area to watch as we're going into the next few days. Let's get back to the tropics. Hurricane HQ here at Fox Weather. We're watching Tropical Storm Humberto. Guess what? It became the 8th named storm to form in the Atlantic yesterday. And now the forecast is this for this to become a major hurricane in the days ahead. It's moving into some more favorable environment, warmer water temperatures, everything working for it. You can see Gabrielle on the top side of your screen, Humberto down to the side of there. By the way, side note, Gabrielle will have an impact on the Azores, but let's factor in or talk about specifically Humberto. Michael, this storm doesn't look all that impressive, kind of ragged-looking storm here. We got a little dry air on the southern side of this, explosion on the northern side, a little bit of wind shear helping to knock this over a little bit, but it's still holding. Still has some winds at 45 miles per hour, and then eventually we're going to see this thing look more like a traditional hurricane, especially from the satellite imagery we'll see, and we'll see that in the days ahead.
Yeah, as you mentioned, a little messy looking right now, but it actually does have a closed, tight, and somewhat well-defined, although you can't necessarily see it on infrared satellite imagery. That was the colorful map that we just showed you. Circulation right now, but as those showers and thunderstorms coalesce around the center of circulation itself, that's going to really pump this thing up, and we step on the gas pedal.
Yeah,
we go from what, 60 later on tomorrow morning up through 115 miles an hour by the time we get to, Monday, which is a Category 3 hurricane.
Yeah, that, and it maybe even holds strong close to that once we get through Tuesday, high in Category 2 at least. And notice here's Bermuda. Bermuda watching closely. The track takes it anywhere within the red, and just to the west of Bermuda, which would have impacts on Bermuda with the rain and the wind, the swells. Bermuda's built for these types of storms. They collect the rainwater from this. It goes into the ground. They use it later, and they've got the pitched roofs to help with the amount of wind. But, Michael, to your point, here's what we've got. The center right about here, a lot of the buildup on the northern side of this storm, a little bit of dry air getting pulled in on the back side of this. But overall, here's the infrared you were talking about, the enhanced satellite. Look at those storm tops. Ooh. Very impressive right there.
Absolutely. The brighter they are, the colder those cloud tops are, a.k.a. the higher those clouds are, is what that is suggesting. And there is a little bit of dry air on the eastern end of the system.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, is that not a lot of that is getting wrapped into the actual center of circulation itself. So what that means is this thing's leaving the dust in its trails.
Yeah.
It's heading into a more dust-less environment.
And then boom.
And then boom. Yeah, boom shakalaka. We got a hurricane on our hands perhaps as early as this weekend.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, we'll be watching it very carefully. Now, here's the thing, Craig. It's not just Humberto that we're watching. We mentioned that Invest 94L that could eventually track close to the U.S. Yesterday on Fox Weather Now, Fox Weather meteorologist Ian Oliver spoke with Dr. Andy Hazelton from the University of Miami about what we could see with Invest 93L, which is now Humberto, and 94L over the coming days.
That western one would be the one of concern for sort of the Bahamas and maybe even the folks in the east coast of the United States. But that's going to take a while to develop because you see the X there. It's down south of Puerto Rico. It's going to move over Hispaniola. Probably won't see much development with that until it gets into the Bahamas, over the weekend. And from there, it's a question of how quickly is it going to turn to the north? Is it going to get pulled to the east by this other system? We call it a Fujiwara or a direct interaction. There's a big dip in the jet stream, that trough over the eastern U.S. that might try to pull it. So it's sort of you have these three features all interacting with each other together, and that makes things really hard to predict. You add in the land and where exactly the center of 94 is going to form, and it's just a really complex forecast problem right now.
Yeah, complex indeed, and that's why we have our hurricane hunters that are going to be flying into these systems to investigate both. And here's the thing, they drop those drop zones in there, they collect great data, and they've actually just done that with Invest 94L. So let me show you some of that data that we've just received.
So cool.
Yeah, and it is literally right now, as you can see, and over the past couple of hours, staying under tropical storm status. This is Invest 94L. The impacts are still being felt, right? Lots of rain in Puerto Rico and then toward Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. We have our newest update. This is just furnished to us by the National Hurricane Center. And I want to show this to you. And let me make it big and
went up.
Yeah, sure did. Both went up. We now have a 90% chance that Invest 94L becomes either a tropical depression or tropical storm in the next 7, but a higher threshold now in the next 48 hours.
Man, that's impressive when you think about that and where the placement is and where it's going, because it has been interacting with the land and the mountains. Having said that, Michael, once it gets closer to the Bahamas, and it looks like that's a possibility in the short period now, and it's in those warmer waters, then we could have what would be the next named storm. And that, by the way, would be Imelda.
And off to the races. You can see it there. By the time we get to this weekend, it starts to strengthen into perhaps that tropical storm before possibly becoming a hurricane. Again, Puerto Rico, eastern parts of the DR, seeing lots of rain from this already. And then our consensus models generally showing this moving over the Bahama Islands. And then look at what things are suggested and trending toward by Tuesday and Wednesday of this upcoming work week. Could we see U.S. impacts? That's, I think, the big question moving forward.
Yeah, stay with us. Keep this conversation going as we watch these models and the input being put into those models with those hurricane hunters. Meantime, take a look at this.
Imelda. And throughout the weekend, we're going to see plenty of thunderstorms. We're bracing for heavy rain, wind, storm surge, flooding, and maybe even possible mudslides, especially where we have elevation in play. Nassau looks beautiful right now. We just have a few clouds out there. You've got the beautiful blue water. But I will say it's not just raining in areas in the Bahamas. We also have Hispaniola. We have parts of Cuba. So anywhere that we have elevation in play and we see way too much rain, we're looking at those potential mudslides. But tropical storm warning out for the Bahamas. You see, that means that we're expecting some of those tropical storm force winds. We're not seeing them yet, right? This is a very disorganized system at this point. But, Kelly talked about Hurricane Humberto and the potential impacts that it could have not only on Bermuda, but eventually on where future Imelda ends up. But you look at the presentation on this on satellite, we've got a lot of activity from north to south here. I wouldn't be surprised as the hurricane hunters are flying into this storm pretty much throughout the day that we might see that center change just a little bit as this starts to organize. And speaking of the hurricane hunters, by the way, they're flying through this storm right now, trying to get some of that crucial data. But then we also have one of those upper air investigations that's happening that's basically taking in the entire environment from what is ahead of Imelda to over to Hurricane Humberto, major hurricane right now, to potential tropical cyclone 9. All of that is really important because these are going to interact with one another. And as they do, that will eventually determine exactly where our potential tropical cyclone ends up. But we do have some churned up surf right now and some of the wave heights getting stronger. Look at the winds now starting to respond. We've got some of those wind gusts that are approaching 15, 20, 25 miles per hour. That's only going to increase as we head through the weekend because we will see some more organization over the next few days. You can see on high-res future radar starting to see more of that center. By the way, there's Humberto that's spinning out there as a major hurricane. This is Sunday evening now. Do we have a named system before the weekend is done? I think that's very likely. And by Monday morning, starting to see a lot more consolidation of that center and a lot more organized system. But in the meantime, we're watching heavy rain in the Bahamas. I think that's going to be a big problem throughout the weekend. Some spots approaching 5 to even 8 inches of rain before this starts to move to the north. And then, Kelly, approaching the southeast coast.
Some of the cruise ships might be impacted here, too.
It's going to be difficult.
Where they port, how long they port, right? Let's have a live look.
Welcome back. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ. We got the big change this afternoon. Now, Tropical Storm Imelda. We also got the big change today in the overall track of the system, what's expected as we move forward through the next few days. So our 2 named storms now, Humberto, this mega hurricane, it became a 5 yesterday, second 5 we've had this season. Thankfully, those have been out over open water. And Imelda, our tropical storm, which took its time to get to that designation. This is the latest we have on Humberto, 150 miles per hour. But if you've been with us, we had talked with our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. There may be some processes underway that may have pulsed back up in intensity. We'll see. But the key here, you look at the track with it, hooking around Bermuda, and then most importantly, turning out to sea, out into the open waters of the North Atlantic. But as it does so, it erodes that area of high pressure. And with the slow pace of Imelda, there's this corridor, a path out to sea that's opening up. So the winds are at 40 miles per hour. Motion is north at 7 miles per hour. You look at it on the visible satellite. Hurricane hunters found some of those tropical storm force winds in through here. They're fairly isolated, though. They only extend out about 30 miles to the north and east from that center. There is the latest forecast track. We'll keep you updated for any changes to this. But what's important, this hard turn to the right, which avoids a direct landfall, although we are expecting some significant impacts in coastal areas. We'll be watching those, and we'll keep you up to speed with them moving forward through the next few days. Looking out at Melbourne Beach, Florida now, tropical storm alerts issued along parts of Florida's east coast, and that is where we find Fox Weather's Michael Estime. Michael, I know you've been watching this. Folks there in Florida and up the coast, glad to see that turn to the right, but it doesn't mean that there won't be any fringe impacts.
No, you mentioned the fact, Ian, that there could be some significant impacts, and we're actually seeing that right now. As you mentioned, we're on the Space Coast, and basically from Jupiter, Florida, all the way up to Daytona Beach, it's a stretch of almost 200 miles under those tropical alerts as we speak, and we officially now have our tropical storm that was just minted as of the 2 o'clock hour. Here's the thing, you look down the beach here, and although there's sunshine, don't get me wrong, and there's a nice breeze out there, these waves are enormous, and this is really going to be the threat moving forward, is the size, the strength, the intensity of these waves. We're expecting them to build upwards of 6 and as high as 10-foot waves are possible. When those big waves, and you can see them right there, crash onto the shore, they then recede, and all that water begins to recede back into the ocean, and that pull, that receding of the water is what we call a rip current, and it's that rip current that can pull swimmers into the water and unfortunately can prove to be fatal and life-threatening. So really the only folks that are out on the water, if you look way in the distance behind me, you can see a couple of surfers, and we actually had a couple of surfers on earlier this morning that we chatted with, and even they said that the water is rough, the water is turbulent, and they too only suggest experienced swimmers and experienced surfers to be in the water. So yeah, you look down the line here, down the shot. This is looking south, by the way, to my right, and you don't really see that many people in the water. They are heeding the advisories, or I should say the watch statements. They're heeding those warnings to just stay out of the water, which is great news. So what else can we expect here? Well, eventually through the day tomorrow, I think on Monday is when we'll really start to feel the effects along the east coast of Florida. We're talking 1 to 3 inches of rain. Some spots, maybe if you're underneath a convective band where there's some thunder and lightning in there, you could pick up maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain. Florida can handle that really well. So that won't be a huge concern. I think that winds at times upwards of 40 miles per hour, again, not devastating to Florida standards. We've experienced stuff much higher than that, but again, a nuisance wind certainly in the forecast. And it's the wind-driven waves, I think, that really are going to steal the weather headlines moving forward. So where do we go from this point? Well, we're expecting for Imelda to eventually strengthen, perhaps into a Category 1 hurricane. I'm going to watch it very carefully, just given the fact that, Ian, one of those ingredients is the fact that we have a really warm Gulf Stream, right? That can help to act like jet fuel, if you will, to really invigorate and energize tropical systems. And so I'm going to be really curious to see, now that we have a tropical storm on our hands, whether there's how much more strengthening is to come, because you look at Humberto, which became a Cat 5, and that wasn't necessarily in the forecast for it to become a Cat 5. So I'm going to be curious to see if Imelda can tap into some of that energy before the wind shear really takes over, as it takes that right-hand turn. And there was a wise man, by the way, on X, formerly Twitter, that said that it looks like Imelda is going to turn the right blinker on and take that sharp right. That person was Ian Oliver on Twitter, by the way. Love following his account. If you don't do it, you need to follow it. But Ian, I thought that was a great analogy and a fantastic example on what's going on.
Yeah, at least it put its blinker on, right? It's got a little driving etiquette, but great point what you're saying, Michael. Things can happen once it gets its tropical structure, and I was standing close by to where you were back in 16 when Matthew was paralleling the coastline, got beat up along the shoreline. That obviously was a monster storm, but to your point, as it strengthens, we'll watch for some of those impacts. That's Michael Estime down there in Melbourne Beach. Thank you. All right, let's time out some of the impacts farther up the coastline from Michael down there on Florida's Atlantic side. You move up the coastline to the Carolinas and Georgia. That is, unfortunately, where we are going to be expecting some impacts. And there's a little bit of a cautionary tale with the messaging. And you've seen what this has looked like. We saw the analysis from Brian Norcross. It is an uglier looking tropical system, right? It's interacting with this boundary. And I know you look at the cone goes right, but the moisture is way off to the north of the center. Cone's only telling us where the center per the National Hurricane Center is. So all that to say, you see the storm center here, and there is the potential for big-time rain totals all the way up through here. The path off to the right, it does limit some of the coastal effects in terms of the push of water into the coastline and, of course, some of the winds that will be strongest closer to the core. So you look at this, and it doesn't anymore look especially menacing to the Carolina coastline. Then we throw on what this actually looks like with our exclusive Fox weather model. All of this now is on the northern periphery. So it is lopsided off to the north because of wind shear. The shape of the storm is important, and it's part of the reason why we always say don't just focus on the cone, focus on impacts. Watch as we move through the early part of the week, Monday into Tuesday. There is that core with the Fox model, which is offshore, yes, but you see the steady stream of moisture. That was Monday. Now we're all the way into Wednesday, and some of these areas are still picking up on some big-time rain amounts. So the difference between this, and this is what we were talking about with Brian too, that kind of intricate dance that's going on, this corridor being here or here, two very different experiences. And we're only talking about maybe 30, 40, 50 miles in the difference with that heaviest rain. So much so that the National Hurricane Center, the forecast is for a fairly widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain, but they're indicating locally higher amounts, up to about 7 inches of rain. And it's already soggy in some of these places with the rain that's preceded this storm. So 7 inches of rain on top of soggy ground, that's still a problem, even though you're seeing the track hook off to the right. So for all those reasons, tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll see what Wednesday looks like. We do have some considerable flash flood threat, and we'll keep you updated on that as we move forward through the early part of the week. The Atlantic, it's as live as ever. We know it's been a kind of a weird season, bunch of strong hurricanes. They've all been out over open water. We've got our whole team, our correspondents, experts, officials, eyeing this storm all afternoon. You're seeing some pictures right there of our team coverage, boots on the ground across the southeast to cover any of these potential impacts along the immediate coastline and in some places into interior areas. We've got much more Fox Weather, our special Hurricane HQ coverage, when we come right back.
Welcome back into Fox Weather First. I'm Haley Meyer. We're keeping a close eye on Imelda as it churns near the Bahamas, moving north of the Bahamas right now. Even though the cone has shifted a little bit, we're still talking some heavy rain threats for portions of the Carolina coast over the next couple of days. Right now, the Carolinas are dealing with some rain moving on shore, a lot of this just to the north of Charleston in this moment. But it is being influenced by that tropical moisture getting surged north from Imelda. Now, peak impacts from Imelda are expected tomorrow through Thursday, so this is just day one of the story here. But for Charleston, South Carolina, you can see where all that heavy rain resides. At one moment, we had some lightning. No longer talking about lightning right now, so speaking to the instability starting to collapse just a touch. We'll keep rain in the forecast for the rest of the day today and even going into tomorrow, with that moisture being its most significant influence. And then it's going to transition to a big surf threat and the onshore winds and coastal flooding as the concern. For right now, winds are a touch gusty, but manageable. Myrtle Beach, 7 miles per hour. Georgetown, 7. Charleston, 7 as well. At one moment over the weekend, Charleston, they declared a local state of emergency.
Oh,
North and South Carolina, both of their governors declared states of emergency, all to preemptively prep and to be ready for the action stage. But that was still when we had 3 separate ideas of what could happen. But now that we have this certainty, seems like the Carolinas have dodged a big bullet.
It's so important to have that in place, right? Because you want to be ready no matter what. Portions of Highway 12, you know the drill. If you live here, it gets covered with water. I remember our storm specialist, Mike Seidel, there the past couple of times talking about this. Same story this round yet again. And notice the constant onshore push. It will include inlets. So it's not just the immediate coast and the Outer Banks, it is the inlets as well, as that constant water is moving up, especially closer to high tide. So we do have the coastal flood advisory, coastal flood warnings, especially closer to high tide, where we will be dealing with perhaps some water inundation, 1 to 2 feet in some cases.
Yeah, the National Weather Service specifically highlighting the southern Pamlico Sound and the Bay River as a couple areas of concern with these strong, persistent northeast winds, because it's not just today. We'll watch as those winds stay persistent coming out of the northeast throughout the rest of tomorrow, slightly moving more parallel to the coastline by the time we get into tomorrow evening. And then eventually, as this thing pulls away, you'll watch as the winds dive back out from the northwest.
Drier air, right? You'd be like,
drier air.
Big change.
Yeah, definitely. So here's the rain forecast for you. At one moment, we were talking about the chance for Wilmington to see close to 12 to 18, 24 inches of rain. That was if we had a stalled out solution coming from Imelda. But with the influence of Humberto really dragging this out to the right, the worst of the rain is remaining right along that bend between Jacksonville, Florida and Savannah, Georgia.
So why has the forecast for Imelda changed so much? Well, the distance between the Tropical Depression 9 that it traveled before becoming a tropical storm, it was slow moving in the nature due to what was going on. Now, the forecast cone has shifted. By the time the system was named Imelda, it got behind the Hurricane Humberto, which has helped redirect it to the east into the open waters, as well as an area of the trough, rather, to the north as well. Forecast models, remember all last week, if you were with us, we were talking about so much uncertainty with the forecast. Forecast models just had a tough time with this. We had two systems very close to each other. One of them hadn't been named yet, Imelda, and it was moving over higher terrain, so it was still struggling. So a lot of this was playing into what was going on. Plus, we had this area of low pressure, non-tropical off the coast, southeast coast, the dip in the jet to the north that was going to happen. The GFS ensembles through the day, today and into tomorrow, take it out to the north and then a quick turn to the northeast. Again, a lot of that having to do with the pull of Humberto, also that trough up to the north. Steering mechanisms play huge. As we take a look at the European ensemble, a lot of these continue to take these in the same direction. Let's take a look at the AI models, because the AI models, and by the way, don't worry about this over here, we're worried about this section right here, continue to do the same. So all of the models picking up on what is going on with the steering mechanisms. Now, when we talk about this, Haley, this is impressive. Now, this is the red areas, the forecast cone that came out Saturday at 5 a.m. When we talk about this, the National Hurricane Center says, it could go anywhere within the center of the cone, the center of the storm rather, within the cone, but it can happen anywhere. Here is where it actually tracked, a little farther to the west. Oftentimes when we see this, Haley, we talk about a slower moving storm moves maybe west a little bit more than a faster moving storm. I think all of that played into this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a slower moving storm means the impacts are drawn out a little bit longer, and especially for spots like Cuba and the Bahamas, they've seen torrential rain at times. I mean, Cuba, they were expecting about 16 inches of rain. Then you talk about their mountainous terrain that they've got across some of these islands in the Caribbean. Big concerns there in regards to mudslides, landslides. Today still going to be a bit of an issue for them as the storm, slow moving, finally starts to pull north.
Well, here's this. This is it. From 5 a.m. Saturday to 11 a.m. on Sunday, this is the hurricane hunters going into the center of the storm. And then the X marks where the center of the storm was. Guess what? As we went through this entire period from Sunday morning 5 a.m. to, Saturday 5 a.m. to Sunday at 11 a.m., this thing had only gone 165 miles. That may seem like a lot, but it's actually not for this type of system. So that's part of the problem here, slower moving storm. If it was moving faster, we'd have more concerns across the southeast coast, but a slow moving storm does help to move this up to the north and eventually go pulled off to the north and northeast.
Well, Craig, you mentioned the hurricane hunters there and how they've been flying through the core of this storm. They flew through Tropical Storm Imelda yesterday, and they were gathering information for the National Weather Service. These missions help us track wind speed, strength, pressure, and more. I mean, you name it. And what's so important about these missions, especially through a tropical storm or a developing hurricane, the models don't necessarily have all of the data. And so it's so important to have the millibar pressure recorded, the wind speeds, and that also helps the National Hurricane Center decide if they want to go from a tropical depression to a tropical storm. And likely it was the hurricane hunters' real-time data that helped them make that jump yesterday at 2 o'clock Eastern time when this thing became named. So we do have one flight that is already en route. WP3D doing some low-level investigation. They're taking out of Lakeland, Florida, so it shouldn't take them too long to get into the center. Just yesterday, we were talking about how some morning missions was one of 11 total missions. Right now, it seems like we've got 7 missions left to go through at least today and into tomorrow, all trying to explore Imelda. Now, the hurricane hunters, just some interesting facts. They started on July 27th back in 1943. They're based in Biloxi, Mississippi and Lakeland, Florida. However, they do have an area in the Caribbean where they will station their planes, especially if we're talking about a hurricane or tropical storm making its way throughout the main development region. Wherever they can get to this storm fastest. You can see some of the gorgeous visuals that they provide. They post photos on the internet. You should be following all of these flight operators. I mean, these pilots are incredible.
Yeah, they are.
They provide ground truth for tropical systems, and we think about Brandon Kopic, who will take us into the heart of severe weather. They are our Brandon Kopics into hurricanes.
In the center of the storm, and they go at different levels, right, Haley? You were talking about this, and it depends on what's going on, whether it's low-level mission, up in the higher elevations. They want to get samples of the storms and all that is happening within the storm. You feed that into the forecast models, and guess what? Your forecast gets even better. A lot of these have these drop sounds that they release from the aircraft, goes right through the hurricane all the way to the surface of the water, and it picks up everything: temperature, wind direction, humidity, all of the information to figure out what is going on with these storms.
Yeah, in meteorology, it's important to not only understand what's going on at the surface, but at every level above. And so the fact that they drop these drop zones from the top, you get a sample of everything from 500 millibars all the way down to 900 millibars. I mean, you name it. They give us crucial information. And also, it's important to input all of this into the models. They can initialize a little bit better. And we've got multiple kinds of aircrafts. They call them, what, Miss Piggy and Kermit?
Yeah,
Those are
exactly.
two names.
Yeah. And some of them have radar on there to figure out what's going on with the storms as well. So this is critical information that we take as we go through the tropics.
Still ahead, we are tracking out Tropical Storm Imelda and the impacts it will bring to the southeast coast. We have our Fox Weather team fanned out across Florida and the Carolinas. We've been speaking to Mike Lestmay out in Melbourne Beach, Florida. We've got Mike Seidel coming up in just a little bit over in Folly Beach, South Carolina. We've got you covered as it all unfolds. Stay tuned. Fox Weather First. We'll be right back.
It's crashing. That will get worse before it gets better with Humberto. And then Molly, right now, Bermuda smack dab in the middle of the cone for Imelda as a hurricane in the coming days.
So as things improve forecast-wise for us here in the lower 48, obviously we need to keep an eye on Bermuda. An interest in Bermuda should keep a close eye on this forecast. You're watching Weather Channel Live. Felicia Combs, I'm Molly McCullum. And Felicia, we're very busy in the tropics right now, not just on the Atlantic side, but also in the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah, I mean, that has been the theme of the season in the Eastern Pacific, right? That while the Atlantic hasn't been quite as busy. Let's break it down. Let's talk about what we're watching. We've got a couple or a few areas to watch in the East Pac. It's been a very busy season there. And then Tropical Storm Imelda and Hurricane Humberto spinning away in the Atlantic Basin. Tropical Storm Imelda, 60-mile-per-hour winds with this tropical storm just north of Great Abaco Island. Forecast to continue moving northward. And then we've got Hurricane Humberto, about 300 miles southwest of Bermuda, currently a Category 4 storm. So yet another major hurricane there that is going to just miss Bermuda. But as we just showed you, we're already starting to feel the indirect impacts. We're going to feel those impacts worsening in Bermuda as Humberto lifts north and then curves off to the north and east, still as a strong hurricane. And then you'll notice the forecast for Imelda here Wednesday morning. Forecast to become a hurricane, and Bermuda is right in the middle of that forecast cone for Imelda right now. So likely feeling some possibly direct impacts from Imelda there in Bermuda after days of indirect impacts from Humberto. We're also feeling indirect impacts in the form of tropical moisture across the Carolinas and the mid-Atlantic. A couple inches of rain still possible to come, and flash flooding is one of the risks that we have through the rest of the day and into tomorrow. We've got a steady feed of this tropical moisture. What you're looking at is the mid-level representation of the water vapor. So where you see the oranges, that's dry air. Where you see the whites and the greens, that's more moisture. And we clearly have a very efficient moisture transport going on out of the Atlantic, out of the tropics, up across the Carolinas, all the way up, in fact, into portions of New England, thanks to this setup that we have. So that rain continuing to stream northward across coastal South Carolina. We've got heavy rain and storms there in coastal North Carolina, central North Carolina, up through Virginia, even up into the Delmarva right now. We've got that feed of tropical moisture that's bringing in some rain. The concern is places like Myrtle Beach and Fayetteville and Raleigh that are having round after round after round of this rain, could be dealing with some flash flooding. You can see the axis of moderate rain pushes farther inland as we head into Tuesday morning. Your Tuesday morning commute in this region could be a bit wet, becoming more sporadic as we head throughout the day on Tuesday and Wednesday. Things will become much less rainy there, but our coastal impacts are not going to be done by Wednesday. You can see these coastal alerts lasting through Friday, coastal flood warnings and coastal flood advisories, because we could have a couple feet of coastal inundation for some of these areas, Molly. So it's been a problem here. And then we also had terrible flooding across the desert Southwest, really Friday and over the weekend.
The Weather Channel continues live for you right now. I'm Justin Michaels in Buxton, North Carolina, and you can see the Atlantic Ocean quite literally surrounding me right now, coming inland in the form of massive waves that continue to batter the coast. We did have high tide at 3:20 rather, central, 3:20 East Coast time, so about an hour and so, a couple minutes ago. So the tide is going out, but it really is not much different now than it was when the tide was at its highest point this afternoon. Water continues to stream in. We do know in the last 24 hours, 6 homes have gone into the ocean, and more are likely going to go into the ocean. It's hard to imagine that most of those homes are now big piles of debris like you see behind me here at the end of this street, Tower Circle. One thing we can't show you out of an abundance of caution and safety for our team is to go up there and show you that everywhere you look beyond these homes, left and right, are just massive piles of house debris. Homes that were standing here 48 hours ago that are no longer. And we'll keep watching Evans Cottage right back there with the expectation. I mean, you can see the massive waves sitting underneath of it. It's only a matter of time before a few rounds of waves like that come through and take that house down. Then you can see here comes more water in off of the Atlantic. So as I go back into Chris Bruin, Chris, something I keep thinking to myself. So, Chris, we do know that those homes out there, they're clearly a complete loss. There's multiple homes that you can't see, but Evans Cottage is indicative of what you're looking at, homes that are out in the Atlantic right now. So, Chris, my thought is, okay, those homes are all complete loss right at this point. They have been condemned. What about this one? There's a rental sign right there. The one across here, also rental. So these homes, Chris, are now the front line, the most coastal homes here on the Atlantic coast in Buxton, North Carolina, whereas a few weeks ago they were the second line. They were one street in, and now they're the waterfront property. Chris, how much longer until the footings of these homes get washed away and they're standing precariously like Evans Cottage? It's only a matter of time. And even after a $40 million beach replenishment program, Chris, in the last 5 years, still all that $40 million basically is washed away. So how do you stop it? You can't. It's the ocean, right? And these coastal storms are going to keep battering it. Chris, into you.
All right. Appreciate the update there, Justin. And again, a very vulnerable spot. The Outer Banks, Buxton, 5 to 7 homes crumbling down into the sea just in the last 24 hours because of the battering of the waves. Not just with these storms offshore, but how active this part of the Atlantic has been. We've had, essentially 2 hurricanes, Imelda and Humberto, close together, churning up the seas the last couple of days. And then earlier in the summer, we had Erin, which was really powerful. Even though it didn't make landfall in the U.S. and really stayed off the coast, it churned up the waves and the coastal flooding for several days. And that was earlier this summer. So they really have taken a beating. And the homes that are on the edge have really felt that. And unfortunately, some of them have crumbled. 100 miles per hour is the latest advisory. Again, we'll get a new update here from the National Hurricane Center within the next 30 minutes or so. There is a hurricane warning out for the island of Bermuda, and we are anticipating a direct landfall here, or very close to the center, going over the island as a whole. So anticipate power outages. Eventually, this is going to be pushing out to further in the Atlantic and become an issue for Europe. We do have a pressure gradient force, though, between our 2 storms in the Atlantic and a high pressure across eastern Canada. And what that is doing is giving us some very strong coastal conditions, which is upping our tidal swings. It's giving us coastal flooding, even into the Chesapeake Bay, mid-Atlantic regions. And we've got Gus Felicia and Nantucket anywhere from 30 to 40 miles per hour.
Very gusty times that have created a lot of indirect impacts along the coast. Let's head to the central portions of the U.S., though, where it is feeling anything but fall-like. It's feeling more like July than October 1st. So
making for a lot of shear that's in the Gulf. Let's say you do get a well put together storm here. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make it up to the coast of the U.S. So there's just so many different factors when it comes to the forecasting. Hopefully things don't go too bad, but as we know from last year, right, this time of year, you can see some action. Let me just show people a couple other Central American gyre storms that have formed. You remember Milton, of course, from last year. That was a CAG storm,
Sure.
as we like to call it. Helene, same deal. The 2 big storms from last year. Talked a little bit earlier about Hurricane Michael back in 2018. This year we have gotten very lucky with a lot of these storms and still had a lot of impacts. We've got about a minute left. Brian, overall thoughts on the rest of the season here as we go forward?
Well, it's been a weird season, so I try not to look too far ahead, because the thing is that those gyre storms, the storms that come out of that, form really quickly. And if a disturbance comes along and and runs into the gyre and then gets kicked north, and the pattern for just a few days is conducive, it can spin up and we can have a big problem. You know, if you look at from birth to landfall in Helene, it was only a few days. You know, it's the nature of those kinds of storms. Not that the odds favor that, because I think actually in those long-range projections they have some climatology in there in terms of developing their odds as well. So they are looking in places that things would traditionally form. Not that that's all of the science there, but I'm saying that that's an element of where they make those areas in those long-range projections.
Very complicated stuff. We've been covering Hurricane Imelda, which is hitting Bermuda as we speak. It's way off the east coast of the U.S., but can you believe it? We're still having big issues across parts of the east coast. You've probably seen some of this video of the houses going down along Cape Hatteras, big-time coastal flooding. You know, we're going to have high surf over the next several days still, even as the storm gets farther and farther away. Look at this. This was from Tuesday, and yeah, a lot of those houses in Buxton that were, you know, pretty close to where the beach is, that used to be a little farther away from the beach, a little further inland. Well, things have changed over the last many years, and we've seen this time and time again over the last few years with, you know, anytime we get that onshore flow, anytime we get some coastal flooding, whether it's from a tropical system, sometimes it's a winter system, sometimes it's a nor'easter coming up the east coast. Anytime you get that onshore flow and it's strong enough, you're going to get some issues when you've got this type of situation going on. I mean, look at this. The amount of debris, it's just getting thrown all over the beach. It moves around to areas that are not exactly where those houses are, too. It's a lot of cleanup. It really is a mess. Of course, if you're not familiar with this situation, these houses are unoccupied. And, you know, obviously they kind of knew that it was pretty soon that they were going to be swallowed up by the water there. And I was just talking about this with our hurricane expert, Brian Norcross. A little tough to tell exactly, like literally what the exact reason is why those houses are going in. You know, I mean, the waves weren't big enough to be actually hitting the houses, but, you know, the stilts there, maybe the sand just getting eroded away. And after years of that, you end up with the scenes that you're seeing right there. So I want to focus in on the impacts that we're going to have along the East Coast right now. We'll get back to Bermuda in just a bit. But look how far off the coast this is. Let me actually pause this and do a little bit of a measurement since we have that capability. All right, yeah, we're about 600 miles off the coast with Imelda. But keep in mind, it's not just Imelda, at least it wasn't initially, especially on Tuesday. We had Humberto, which is now, whoops, that's the wrong thing. Humberto is now not a tropical system anymore. It's headed toward Europe. I'll cover that in just a second. But instead of just one compact area of low pressure here and another one, which was Humberto to the northeast, this has become kind of a very broad area of counterclockwise circulation. What does that do here? Well, if you live along the coast, especially the northeast-facing coastlines like parts of eastern Florida, Cape Hatteras, etc., you're going to get the onshore flow. I mean, of course, it does have some effects even up in the mid-Atlantic and places like South Carolina and the Georgia coast, but it tends to be the worst where, you know, these areas where the coast itself is facing toward the northeast, because that's where you get the most direct onshore flow. Now, obviously, Florida is much farther away. It's more just some high surf there, rip currents and things like that. They're not seeing the big damage like what we've got in parts of North Carolina. But it just always fascinates me how far away the storm could be, and you're still having huge issues. This was from just a little bit ago. I always like to look at the visible satellite. Sun's down now, so this is a little bit outdated, but really a beautiful view of a storm that's way off the coast. Now, you got to keep in mind, it's not just the low pressure that's causing the wind. The wind is caused by a change in pressure. So you've got to have some kind of high pressure that's going to be interacting with the low that I was just talking about. So remember I mentioned this big broad area of counterclockwise circulation? Well, there happens to be a strong high that's building in, not terribly far toward the northeast. So the bigger the difference in pressure, so the stronger the low or the stronger the high, and the closer they are together, the stronger wind you get in between them. And that's the situation we have going on right now. This high building in is going to really make the wind persist for several days. So be prepared for this. I mean, it's going to last all the way through Friday. We've got the coastal flooding alerts that are out, coastal flood advisories. I believe those go through Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they do. And we've got high surf advisories, all the things you would expect there. Here's Nags Head, North Carolina, by the way, just to give you an idea of what some of those waves look like. Yeah, pretty solid waves that are off the coast. I'll give you some numbers on those waves in just a second, but let me also mention the rip currents, because that's going to be a big deal. I've really tried to hammer this point home. Rip currents are a silent killer. They kill a lot of people every year. The water may not look as bad, especially by the time we get to Friday, as the storm's farther off the coast and the waves are not quite as high anymore. You might be tempted to go in the water, but you can't see the rip currents a lot of the time unless you have a elevated view and you're looking down at the beach. And you have to know how to actually identify a rip current. So there's a lot of stuff not going in your favor when it comes to that. I'd be keeping the kids out of the water all the way through the rest of the work week. I think that's a good idea. Look at the wind, still gusty, 20 to 35 miles per hour. Piney Island there, 32 mile per hour wind gusts, and you notice the wind direction. It's basically out of the northeast here, so this is going to continue to be an issue for the next few days. The wind has calmed down, though. You notice the big difference between the northeast-facing shores and the southeast-facing shores. This is less of an onshore flow. I suppose it is kind of an onshore flow down here in coastal Georgia, but it's a coast parallel flow across parts of South Carolina. So not having as big of impacts there. A little gusty still down in Florida, but the worst is over for you guys. St. Augustine, about 15 miles per hour or so. So I talked about the wave heights. They're still pretty impressive right now. It takes a little while for all that churning of the water to wind down. We're talking, anywhere from 10 to 20 foot waves just off the coast here, with the onshore component to them. Let's see what they look like a little farther toward the south. Yeah, not quite as bad. We're at about 5 to 10 foot waves, but that's still higher than they were a couple of days ago. A lot of influence still going on from these storms. And then we've got Florida, where these are still actually pretty decent waves. I remember covering this whole story a couple of days ago. I think it was just 2 days ago, and these numbers were significantly lower than that. The forecast over the next few days, this really gives you an idea, the wide view of just how far-reaching the wave action can be. I mean, look how far off the coast the storm is, and it takes a while for things to quiet down. So here we are Friday, you get into late Friday and Saturday, things will start to improve from north to south. So, the rip currents up here, the high surf that we're having in parts of the mid-Atlantic, although it's not as bad as places farther toward the south, you guys are going to be the ones that see things quiet down first, and then it gradually progresses farther and farther down toward the south. But let me just give you an idea here. We've got the before and after along the Cape Hatteras coast here. This is Buxton, North Carolina. So this is September 2009. A lot of people that I've talked to, they like to say, why would you build a house right there, literally in the water? But that wasn't the case when the houses were built. Look where the water was. Here's the water. Here are the houses that collapsed over the last few days. So what's happened over the years, we've got a lot of beach erosion. Here's the before. Now here's the after. Look where the beach is. The beach line is right there right now. And you can see the difference. I mean, that's, what, 100 yards, something like that? So a pretty big deal, to say the least. And it was certainly not expected that those houses were going to be in that much danger when they went up. Now, I want to talk about the future of the forecast here. A lot of the times we really focus in on what's going on in the U.S. Obviously, Bermuda's getting hit directly, so that's a big story. This has been a really interesting thing to watch pan out. The way that Humberto and Imelda interacted initially, and also what's going to end up happening in Europe. A lot of the times, these storms actually end up in Western Europe, and they can cause some really big issues. I'm going to show you that forecast in just a second, but real quick, I've got to show you the satellite image of the Fujiwara swirl that we had between Imelda and Humberto. And obviously, this is not current, slightly outdated here, but this is what was going on yesterday. Look at this. They spin counterclockwise around each other. Watch this happen. Look at this. Going this way, going that way. And it was the pull of Humberto, which is this storm right here. It was the pull of that Fujiwara effect that at least helped to take Imelda out to sea. We also had a trough coming off the east coast of the U.S. and high pressure that was far enough west that it wasn't going to pull it in. But that was really, really something to see, that close to the coast, the Fujiwara effect happening. As a geek meteorologist, you always get a kick out of seeing something like that. So here's what's left over of Humberto. This is the wind that we're looking at. This is obviously Imelda, which is the stronger storm now. That wasn't always the case. Focus in here on Ireland. I think they're going to have a pretty nasty storm coming up this weekend. So here's the leftovers of Humberto. Again, it's not a tropical system anymore. But look what happens to it as it moves farther toward the northeast. A lot of the times, these storms will get up into the North Atlantic here, and this area that I've circled, it's an area that is really favorable for storms strengthening. It's not a tropical thing, it's just a regular storm, but it strengthens like crazy. And look at how the wind increases right as it reaches the west coast of Europe here. And again, I think Ireland is likely to take the worst of this. It's going to be a nasty storm. And yeah, northern parts of England could get in on some of that, and eventually Scandinavia. Look how massive this thing becomes compared to what it looks like right now. Let me back it up a little bit. All right, so you see it's just this little chunk of energy. Yeah, you got some wind with it. It's a storm. And then it becomes a North Atlantic monster. Isn't that something to see? And then just kind of lingers over there for a little bit. So we stopped the model at Sunday. But yeah, Friday into Saturday, it's going to be very, very rough over there in western parts of Europe. Let's talk Bermuda here real quick, because Bermuda is about to be hit by a hurricane, or pretty much getting hit by a hurricane as we speak. I want to talk about the forecast when it comes to Imelda. The hurricane force wind is going to last likely through Thursday morning, okay? So, you know, here we are 3 a.m. or so. This is Atlantic time, which is 1 hour past Eastern time. This is 3 a.m. This is the forecast model. The colors that you see are depicting the wind field of the storm. Look at this, 60 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts. Very likely that we'll have a Category 2 storm that's moving over as it does so. Here we are Thursday morning. That's tomorrow morning. We've got 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts still. So it's going to take a while for the wind to wind down, even though it's a fast moving storm. Now, when it comes to the rain, a much more difficult forecast here. It's a very close call. I think Brian Norcross said it the best. Trying to forecast the rain totals with this one at any time frame outside of an hour before it hits is foolhardy. I think were the actual words that he used. But the point is, it's going to be a very close call. The shield of the strongest rain is certainly going to be on the north side of the storm. All right. So the question is, you know, if there's a tiny little bit of a wobble toward the south, then Bermuda ends up in this. Most forecast models are showing the heaviest of the rain staying north, but we will watch that closely and keep you updated. And coming up after the break, we'll do a full breakdown on the forecast here that's coming up for Bermuda. Yeah. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ. There's some video from a little bit earlier out of St. George's, Bermuda. I can guarantee you it looks a lot different than that right now. The wind is going to be very strong through the entire night. We've got a hurricane, literally, that's moving through, and it looks like the center of it is going to be basically making a direct hit. So, you know, it's going to be a long night, some very heavy wind. Heaviest of the rain may stay a little bit north of the island. We're still going to have some rain, and it likely will be at least heavy at times. But the heaviest of the rain, the main precip core, may end up a little bit farther north than it initially looked like. I think wind is going to be the biggest problem for the island of Bermuda. But yeah, Category 2 Hurricane Imelda. We've been following it for the last couple of days. It meandered off the southeast coast of the U.S. for a little bit, and now it's hitting Bermuda. So there you go. Hurricane warning in effect for Bermuda. Let's show you the forecast with this, how this is going to pan out through the night. Very interesting forecast here, because it's the backside of the storm. Here we are 3 a.m. or so. It's the backside of the storm where the strongest of the wind is. Every storm's a little bit different, and in this case, you know, we'll back it up a little bit. You could see the northeast side a little bit earlier really did not have wind that was all that strong. So when it initially comes in, it takes a while for the wind to kick in, especially the worst of it, which is going to be on the backside of it. That'll be through, you know, the wee hours of the morning here on Thursday, and actually likely lasting into just basically the entire morning on Thursday. Things will wind down as we get closer to midday, especially into the evening. It's just going to be a gradual decrease of the wind as we get deeper and deeper into the day. What are these wind gusts going to look like? Well, I'll actually give you some numbers on it. We'll go to a little bit of a higher resolution forecast model. And I know you guys have been through hurricanes before in Bermuda, but yeah, this is going to be pretty significant. Look at this, 70, 80 mile per hour winds. This is 2, 3, 4 o'clock or so in the morning. And it stays that way for a little while. That backside of the storm, the shield of wind here, is very, very persistent. And it's going to last for a pretty good while, even though the storm is moving fairly fast. Now, once that initial wall of wind gets out, Again, follow the time here up at the top left of the screen. Here's Bermuda time, Atlantic time. It's 1 hour past Eastern time, by the way, for you folks watching in the U.S. 7 a.m., 8 a.m., you can see we're getting tropical storm force gusts. So the hurricane force wind lasts a couple of hours. I'd say 3, 4, maybe 5 hours or so. And then gradually throughout the day on Thursday, we're going to start to see some pretty big improvements. Now, we've got to talk another system out in the tropics. The Hurricane Center actually just recently put out, this was during the night on Wednesday, not too long ago, a new little lemon, as we like to call it. 20% chance of development. This is a wave coming off of the west coast of Africa. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this time of year, here we are in October. It's not like we never get storms coming off the west coast of Africa, especially in early October. But we start to see a little bit of a shift in the Atlantic hurricane season usually as we go through October. We start to see more action, down in the Caribbean, down in the Gulf, as opposed to, late August and into September when you've got all these waves coming off the west coast of Africa and making the trek all the way across the Atlantic. Now, it can happen for sure. This one, I would say as of right now, let's not get too worried about it. We're really, really far out in the forecast. There are some steering patterns also that I think are going to help us out here. I'll actually talk to Brian Norcross about this in a little bit. We'll have him coming up. But look at this big, broad area of high pressure. This is the Bermuda High, kind of sitting over the central Atlantic. And there will likely be an area of low pressure that spins counterclockwise. So when you put these two spins together, even if the storm makes it, which it may not, even if it makes it out here somewhere close to the Leeward Islands, the most likely scenario, again, this is not for sure because it's so far out in the forecast, but this is kind of what it looks like it's going to be. It looks like it'll be some kind of steering pattern along with this trough up toward the north that may pull it that way. It looks more likely that it's going to be a peel off toward the north type of storm than a storm that gets close to the east coast of the U.S. type of storm. But again, that's super long-range forecasting. But we do need to talk a little bit about the Caribbean and the Gulf because, as I mentioned, things do start to heat up around there this time of year. So the Hurricane Center puts out these long-range outlooks. This one is for the 8th through the 14th, so basically a week from now up until 2 weeks from now. And they highlight this area. Western Gulf, Western Caribbean, this is all associated with something that we call the Central American Gyre. It's basically this big area of low pressure that forms usually early and later in the hurricane season. And it can be around any time of the hurricane season, but it tends to more often be around during the early and late part of the season. And on the outskirts of it, it can actually form some smaller areas of low pressure, or at least what start as smaller areas of low pressure that can end up becoming tropical systems because the water's so warm, you tend to get a little bit less shear during those parts of the season. Now, they've got this general area around the gyre highlighted for some possible development. The strongest chance of development, which really does kind of follow the trends that we've seen so far this year, when we've had these CAG, Central American Gyre setups off in the East Pacific rather than in the Western Caribbean and the Gulf. But there still is going to be the possibility of some development there. Now we'll go to the week after that. So this is 2 weeks from now through 3 weeks from now, middle to end of October. And you see it shifts a little bit farther toward the east. So this would start to include parts of the Western Caribbean and the Western Gulf. And again, these are just very generalized long-range outlooks, trying to give you an idea of just what could end up being a bit of a hotbed for some kind of activity. It's all very, very generalized, so don't get too worried about that. Now, speaking of October, let's talk about some historic October hurricanes. Well, we certainly had one last year. That's some video out of Bradenton. Can you guess which storm that one is? That was Hurricane Milton, which was a monster Category 5 when it was out in the Gulf. Did not make landfall as a Category 5, but it was still a devastating storm. You look at the satellite imagery from this storm, it was just unbelievable. It got north of the Yucatan Peninsula, slowly moved from west to east, and luckily lost some strength before it hit the west coast of Florida, but the wind was strong, to say the least. I was out covering it in Orlando, and we didn't even get the worst of it. I think the biggest wind gust in Orlando was a little bit over 80 miles per hour. Way worse along the coast. You remember the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium took some serious damage. That was this storm, and that name has now been retired. It actually got down to 895 millibars of pressure. You remember that? 180 mile per hour max winds. It was a small compact storm. This was before it hit the coast, And then, of course, it lost a little bit of strength as it got closer. When you look at the track of Milton, you recall it went right across the middle part of Florida, started in the western Gulf, by the way, close to that Central American gyre, and made landfall a little bit south of Tampa, not far from Sarasota. And yeah, there was that 87-mile-per-hour wind gust in Orlando, but we had triple-digit wind gusts along the coast, closer to the center, as you might imagine. Oh, here's the other thing with Milton. You remember the tornado outbreak that we had with it? Whew. That was something else. 46 confirmed tornadoes, including some pretty strong ones as well, at least strong for a tropical system. Yeah, look at that. This is actually video out of one of the tornadoes as well. That's in Fort Myers, and usually those are on the southeast side of the system, which is what we saw with Milton. Let's talk Hurricane Sandy here, because that was also an October storm, a little bit of a different one. So we talk about a couple different things during the month of October. We see things heat up in the Caribbean and the Gulf. We get the Central American gyre going. But then you can also get these interesting storms that can take on some extra tropical properties as they get closer to land. And if you recall, that was the big story with Sandy. Should we keep the name? Should we not keep the name? Is it technically tropical? Is it subtropical? Is it non-tropical? It didn't matter. It was a storm that was unbelievably devastating up here in the Northeast. You know, I just moved up here from the South, and the stories I hear from people that live in New York City, and now I can actually appreciate it, having having to walk through New York City pretty much every day, just picturing some of those areas underwater. It really is pretty unimaginable. That must have been surreal to see in person. But yeah, for some reason the track is not showing up on here, but the track, it was up there in the Northeast, and it was a very big deal for parts of New Jersey, New York, and a lot of the coast. Humongous wind field with this one. The tropical storm force wind, almost 500 miles extended from the center. So that's not something you see every day. And of course, the storm surge was a very, very big deal. Look at this. Remember this hurricane? Hurricane Michael, Category 5 landfall, just an absolute monster. That was also an October storm back in 2018. Look at the satellite imagery on Michael, by the way. This storm produced some of the craziest wind video I've ever seen. I think there was an Air Force base somewhere close to where it made landfall. I can't remember where. Wasn't it PCB, Panama City Beach, or was it Pensacola? I think it was one of the two. I'm mixing up the P cities. But either way, 160 mile per hour max winds. There's still problems from Hurricane Michael now. And it's many, many years after. It's ridiculous. $25+ billion in damage. The point is, October can be a very bad month for hurricanes. We saw it last year, and just because September was quiet and we haven't gotten a direct landfall in the U.S. doesn't mean that nothing bad can happen. We'll be right back.
St. Paul, well, that summer heat, it is coming back with a vengeance. Look at this.
That doesn't seem right.
St. Paul's 85, Miami's 86.
Wow.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that I would not have guessed.
Are you kidding me?
I would not have. Those are two that I would have thought would have a few degrees of separation, to say the least.
This time of the year, early October, no way, right? But we look good. I mean, we've actually got more sunshine in St. Paul than we do in Florida.
That's the problem, isn't it, with South Florida? You got a lot of rain on the way.
Too much.
Dr. Knapp, you get to do the news.
Yeah, sorry to report that the Sunshine State is delaying using its name for any good for at least another week. It's going to be a rainy state, again, for especially southern and eastern Florida. Now, this area to watch, this waffle cone, it's not really a big concern that this is going to develop. It's a 90% chance that it won't, especially because there's a lot of non-tropical setup, frontal boundary, and upper-level trough in the atmosphere. It's going to be spending a lot of time over land, but you can never rule something out over the warm waters of the Gulf, right? But the main issue is going to be very similar in general to what we've had many times this summer and fall in Florida. Frontal boundaries washing out over the state, upper level troughs, and a slight chance of development, but rain being the main issue. So there goes post-tropical Imelda. Here's our big high over the Northeast, and we've got our onshore flow into the east coast of the U.S., including Florida. Now, what's up with these thunderstorms down here? Well, there is not only that easterly flow south of the high, there is this upper level trough that's moving over Florida right now, and there is somewhat of a washing out frontal boundary in here, and that's got a built-in area of enhanced moisture and a little bit of enhanced spin, and there's even more moisture, Caribbean style, farther to the south. So you can see that easterly flow is meeting up with this weak area of low pressure and troughing along that boundary. and you can see the thunderstorms starting to increase over the northwestern Bahamas. It's not much right now, but it will become more. So colors of the low-level spin, and you can kind of see with the dashed white lines this upper-level troughing overhead. Fast forward a couple of days. Let's get to the weekend, and what we see changing is upper-level troughing magnifying over the Gulf. That's the dashed white lines, and this area of spin is starting to focus over Florida. And it's a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. It's not an environment really conducive for a tropical system to form, and that upper trough is going to send that area of low-level spin up the peninsula and into the southeast by Monday. So whether or not it's actually a front or the remnants of a front, there will be a boundary in place that has a lot of focused moisture and spin. And as that low develops over Florida, it will bring more moisture northward out of the Caribbean. So the east coast of Florida, because we're going to be south of that surface high over the eastern U.S., that's where the onshore flow, the rip currents, and the heaviest rain are going to be. So there's our high. Here's our weak surface trough and boundary. Over the next few days, you'll see how the moisture gets increased, especially during the afternoon and evening when you add the daytime heating. Saturday into Sunday, that feature starts to move northward through Florida all the way into Monday. It's going to stay wet over the Sunshine State, Alex.
Rain across the Orlando metro area earlier today left maybe some unhappy kiddos in the mouse ears. No one wants that.
Well, Hurricane Imelda just whooping Bermuda with some heavy wind, some rough surf. It roared by last night, and it got really dicey there for a minute. We had thousands that went without power, unfortunately, but hopefully, today, no worse for wear. But we are watching always the next thing, Dr. Nab.
And this time of year, especially in the last few decades, we've had to watch the eastern Atlantic with the tropical waves developing east of the Caribbean a lot more often than we used to. So the East Pacific is staying busy. We've got that, mostly non-tropical situation over Florida with the upper level low in the front. But the next area to watch will be another tropical wave that's about to leave Africa. So its chances of development will probably be going up, but what are its chances it will affect the continental U.S.? Well, we have post-tropical Imelda and that front, and they've got another tropical wave here, another one near the Cabo Verde Islands, but there's another one about to leave Africa, and this will catch up to the one ahead of it. So the spin is going to take some time to consolidate, but then eventually, when it gets west of the Cabo Verde Islands, Hurricane Center's putting a 20% chance of development over the next week, not over the next couple of days, but maybe starting this weekend. Now, I went back and looked. In the active era since 1995, we've had 7 storms form in that area over the next week on the calendar, and we've had a couple of them become hurricanes, but never have we had any system last much farther west than the eastern Caribbean. And I even went back and looked all the way back to 1950, and we've never had a system reach the continental U.S. when it has formed in this area. So this would be unprecedented if it were to form in that area and then reach the continental U.S. But the eastern Caribbean needs to watch because the waters are still plenty warm. And yes, there's an upper level trough in the middle of the Atlantic, but south of that, upper level high pressure. And here comes that wave. So watch as it comes out over to the warmer waters. A few decades ago, this didn't happen as much, but the waters have been perpetually warm out there. So this is the new normal. Things forming in October in the main development region in the eastern Atlantic with upper level high pressure. There goes that trough. So heads up for the northeastern Caribbean about a week from now, if this modeling is right. Then the big question is, will that next trough, not this weekend's, but next trough that cuts off over Florida, will that prevent the system from making it farther to the west? The GFS shows something similar. So a lot to watch in the tropics over the next week plus.
And from the Atlantic to the Pacific, we're eyeing a southwest soaker, all sourced by tropical moisture. You have Hurricane Priscilla right now in the Pacific, a buzzsaw of a storm, Category 2 status. But as we take a look at how things continue to progress, it looks like Priscilla and Octave are going to try to do a bit of a tango. They dance around each other, and they perform what is known in the meteorological world as the Fujiwara effect. That's when one storm, which is typically bigger than the other, absorbs a lot of that moisture heading into next week. That's going to be the case with this go-round. Eventually, we see Octave become post-tropical. Priscilla absorbs that moisture, and then that moisture has to go somewhere, and it heads across parts of the southwest. This is where we could see a big flood threat kind of set up shop, rounding out this week, heading into this weekend. It starts today, it continues into tomorrow. Notice that we do have at least a 1 out of 4 threat for flooding up across the board. As we head into the latter half of the week, we'll watch areas like Arizona, back towards New Mexico initially to see and experience a lot of this moisture. But going into the weekend, it spreads out across all of the 4 corner states. So we're watching Utah as well as even back towards Colorado to experience this too. It comes in the form of rain. It's going to be heavy tropical downpours that are going to be expected, and it is going to be in the flooding realm. So we have Friday and into Saturday with this heightened risk of excessive rainfall, that flash flood threat kind of sitting at a 2 out of 4 right now. We'll see if that changes. Looking at some of these totals, they look pretty impressive, especially for the state of Arizona. This is where we could see anywhere from about 2 to 5 inches of rain squeezed out of this tropical moisture over parts of Arizona and eventually into southern Utah.
And welcome back into Fox Weather Live. We're tracking 2 big stories that are going to emerge throughout the week. We got a nor'easter that's brewing, and you'll notice the impact zone, the East Coast, and those vulnerable areas like the Carolinas, that the last thing they need is a prolonged wind event. We'll be timing it out and talking about the expectations ahead as we enter into the latter half of the work week, into the weekend. And then we have Tropical Storm Jerry that's marching its way closer and closer to the Leeward Islands and the Lesser Antilles. What's that ultimate impact? And of course, as it climbs to the north, will it have any influence on the nor'easter we were just talking about? Let's jump into these stories and more right now. First, we're going to start off with the cold front.
I need the tea.
And we're talking about, of course, what's building in the Atlantic. Kenna, we were just hearing Brandy talk about the king tide. And normally this time of year, you think about October, this was actually the day where Milton went through rapid intensification, became a Cat 5. That's what 2024. 2025, you're worried about the supermoon. It just shows you the difference between one year.
Such a stark difference in 1 year. I mean, last year this time we had just came off the hills of Helene too. So we've had some pretty impressive storms. They just haven't made landfall in the United States. And no one's complaining by that by any means. They have been impacting, though, those across the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward Islands, and Jerry would be no different with that.
And when you're mentioning those storms, Aaron, Gabrielle, Humberto, those are the ones that are kind of setting the stage for what Jerry likely could do, but we do have some question marks ahead. It's racing towards the Leeward Islands, still about 1,100 miles away. It's going to strengthen on approach.
Yes, absolutely. You'll notice Thursday evening into Friday evening that huge jump in winds showing the intensity of this. And then even as we head into the weekend, we've seen storms like Gabrielle outperform the models. That could certainly be a case here as well. So we'll have to watch even going into the weekend what kind of plays out. Watch is already up across the board.
Yeah, and so Barbuda is actually in the cusp of this cone right now, but notice outside of that, they already have the tropical storm watch. Won't be surprised if this budges a little further to the west, and if this gets this included, because that's a big component. I want to bring up what we're going to see the hurricane hunters. What they do is they get in there, real-time data. They feed this back to the Hurricane Center and also to those models to update their runs. And right now, we don't have perfect agreement.
And you talked about the traditional models, too, kind of outside of the cone, hinting at the idea that this could shift a little farther to the east. That's worth watching, but most of them do have the consensus of pushing in this direction to the north and back out towards the west.
Yeah, even that there's that fork in the road, it's something you have to take note of, that means there's the possibility of that. And then even when you're looking at the cone, as of right now, the consensus is really leaning heavy to that northeast turn quicker than even what the cone indicates. I mean, it's now all the way on the eastern side of this, which, again, doesn't look like much from here. That's hundreds of miles and vastly different impacts for those areas of the Lesser Antilles.
I mean, it's all about the movement, too. Will this make that turn quick enough? Will it kind of stall out in this area that allows for it to impact the Lesser Antilles and possibly Puerto Rico a little longer? That's still up across the board. It's all about that movement and what happens beyond that.
Yeah, and there's some questions marks about what happens beyond that. And so we had hurricane specialist Brian Norcross kind of talk more about what could happen if they do miss the Lesser Antilles. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The blue in here, the Google AI models have edged closer to the islands. And now that's been a good model for us this hurricane season. Even if the system misses the islands, we're still going to have this moisture feed after it that could affect all the way over to the Virgin Islands, maybe even Puerto Rico. So we're going to watch that, because sometimes the moisture feeds can end up being the worst of it if the storm misses.
And a big component of all of this is what's that intensity like? Like we just were alluding to, a lot of times these storms have outperformed. And again, there's an indication, there's a few models that say this could go major status. And the bigger this storm, the bigger the impacts
can
become.
be felt. Yeah, they can be felt a little bit more wide beyond, those outer bands. So we'll watch it. Thursday, Friday is going to be a very interesting time frame.
Yeah.
You got to just continue to keep it here to Fox Weather for the details.
Yeah, we'll be watching that and what's happening stateside. Look at this, shelf clouds.
Right now on Weekend Recharge, severe thunderstorms are putting more than 25 million Americans on alert this morning. From central Texas to the Gulf Coast, dangerous storms are rolling across the region, unpacking more threats for hail, damaging gusty winds, tornadoes. We have the timing next.
And in the tropics, all eyes are on Melissa, on track to explode in size and rapidly intensify over the weekend into a dangerous Cat 4 or even Cat 5 hurricane. The islands of Jamaica, Cuba, and Hispaniola are bracing for life-threatening impacts like flooding rain, storm surge, and landslides. We track it straight ahead on Weekend Recharge. Hey there, good Saturday morning, and welcome to Weekend Recharge. I'm Paul Goodlow.
And I'm Lynette Charles. America's weekend depends on the weather. And of course, all eyes are on Melissa.
Yeah, here we go. Once again, it's just tropical storm, but it has been strengthening and forecast. The forecast is for rapid intensification.
Yeah, but the most concerning part is the fact that it's just sitting there, so it has days and days of rain. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, especially Jamaica. You're going to take this for all the threats. Jamaica is right on tap for all that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're also watching some severe thunderstorms for today as well.
All right, we're also watching the tropics, Lynette, because we're not over with the hurricane season.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and take you live now to Kingston, Jamaica here, because yes, we go all the way to November 30th. So it is a long season. And Jamaica, you need to be on alert because pretty soon you are going to be dealing with this nasty hurricane. Yeah, most likely it's going to be happening as we go in through this week. So let's talk about it and what's going on right now with Tropical Storm Melissa. But again, this thing is going to start to ramp up. We're going to talk about rapid intensification as well. But in the meantime, right now, we're looking at these winds sustained at about 70 miles an hour, and it is moving so slowly. Look at this, 1 mile per hour as it's going to continue to dump plenty of rain. So already doing so, and this is what's going to be the problem, and it hasn't even gotten close to land quite yet. So already we're watching plenty of alerts up here. So we do have hurricane watches on the south side of Haiti right now, and we also do have tropical storm warnings as well. And for Jamaica, yes, we're talking about hurricane warnings going on at this point. So this is the track of Melissa at this point, and you can see it kind of makes that on that west track, and then it makes that northerly pull. That's all courtesy of this trough that's going to try to make it go to the north. But the bottom line is, you hear us say rapid intensification. That means at least 35-mile-an-hour wind increase in about 24 hours, and it is difficult to forecast. So, but again, lately, a lot of these storms, these tropical systems have been undergoing the rapid intensification. So we look at the model wind forecast, and I want to show you, this is the Google model right here, and this is the one that's kind of yellowish goldish. This is the one where we're going to be watching that has it making landfall, possibly maybe as a Category 4 hurricanes. The other models are in agreement that maybe a Category 2, possibly a Category 3. If we're talking about a Category 3, that still is a major hurricane. Bottom line is that this thing is going to intensify, being that we have the conditions in the atmosphere really letting it do so. We're definitely dealing with the warmer sea surface temperatures, but even below the surface, we have these temperatures that are over 80 degrees. So yeah, that is fuel. It's kind of like you light a match and boom, this thing goes off. Let's talk about the wind field, because the wind field is going to be quite large here, where we can deal with some tropical storm force winds. We're going to be seeing this around Jamaica. And when we talk about the tropical storm force winds, Paul, we know that we need 39 or higher than that. And then finally, as it gets closer, we're talking about hurricane force winds as well.
Yeah, we're talking direct landfall
exactly.
in Jamaica. There is no way around that.
Yep.
Let's talk about this, because these are life-threatening impacts headed your way in Jamaica. So if you have travel plans to Jamaica over the next 4, 5, even 7 days, you definitely want to hopefully have travel insurance. This is something that you don't want to be if you don't have to be on that island. But right now, Jamaica, home to millions of people, and this is life-threatening. Life-threatening, catastrophic rain, landslides, a huge concern. I know it's tropical, lush island, but mountains here, 6 to over 7,000 feet. It's bringing out even more rain. So life, you have to protect life and property secondary, but life initially. And this system is slow moving. So we have everything, every element of a risk from a hurricane is on the table right now for Jamaica. Now, the surrounding islands, we call these the Greater Antilles. This is the island of Hispaniola. That's the border. You got Haiti on the west and the DR here on the right. You could see maybe 1 to 2 feet of snow. Mountains here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 foot, even 10,000 foot mountains here in the DR. So that's going to ring out even more rain. Cuba, we got 5,000, 6,000 foot mountains here. Jamaica, 7,000+ foot mountains here. That rings out even more. Both models are calling for life-threatening rain, but here's the deal. The American model is putting a lot more to the east side, but the European is still just devastating types of rainfall numbers are coming out over the island of Jamaica, because Jamaica, you'll be under this thing, even having landfall the longest. And this, I think, also with the mountains ringing out even more rain. So even the Hurricane Center is probably pushing more for that European model solution. And now a lot of the models, including the ensembles, are all taking it, making it a landfall, the center across Jamaica. Again, 6,000, 7,000+ foot mountains here, direct landfall of that center. So storm surge, strongest winds, all on the table, not to mention maybe a foot of rain on the table for Jamaica, whether you're on the Negril side, Montego Bay, Kingston for sure. You're going to get a lot of storm surge in that bay. Expect the airport to be closed for days because of this. We look at the European model. Look how it's kind of slowly meanders it here for several days. Today's Sunday. This is location on Tuesday, potential landfall on Tuesday. 4 days from now. So 4 days of this thing strengthening and spinning all the impacts on this beautiful island here. And then eventually it kind of pulls it northward and then kind of maybe even has a secondary landfall in Cuba as a weakened system, but still, no brakes, just taking your foot off the gas. And hopefully by Wednesday, we start ending the rain there in Jamaica and the recovery begins. But this type of forecast here, which, if you're in Jamaica or have interest in Jamaica, you have to prepare, and if you can, maybe evacuate that island. Lynette?
All right, Paul, thanks. We invite you to stay with us with much more ahead on Weekend Recharge. Mother Nature looking to serve up some tricks, not treats, as we get closer to Halloween. We break down where October could end on a wet and windy note.
Back here on this Sunday edition of Fox Weather Live, it is the final week of daylight saving time. We turn our clocks back next weekend, and also November begins. So definitely a lot to consider as we close out this final week. Here we are with the late season major hurricane in the Caribbean, one that is set to bring catastrophic impact to parts of the Caribbean islands, namely Jamaica, but definitely an active pattern across the United States too, with lots to track into the week ahead. So let's reset today's weather agenda. Of course, we're going to focus in on the tropics with major Hurricane Melissa. Here's a view out of Kingston, Jamaica from yesterday. Our Fox Weather's Robert Ray is on the ground. He's been giving reports all morning long. We're going to hear from him, of course, coming up this afternoon, but just an incredible feat to make sure that every effort is being taken to protect life and property as Melissa begins its approach to the island late tomorrow night into early Tuesday morning. Seriously, a catastrophic impact. This turning into what is very likely the worst case scenario to the island of Jamaica. As we take a look at the latest advisory that came in around 11 o'clock this morning, we'll get another advisory, another update from the National Hurricane Center at 2 o'clock this afternoon. No changes here. We're still sitting at a Cat 4, leveling off in intensity throughout the afternoon. A slower movement off to the west at around 3 miles an hour. But when you take a look at that enhanced satellite, remember, this is a view from upstairs, and we're measuring with satellites the temperature of
of our clouds. And the colder those temperatures are, the more intense our thunderstorms are. And boy, have we seen that really intense band of thunderstorms that have been working around the core of this storm. Something that we have noticed, though, over the course of the last few hours has been kind of the opening up of that eye wall. Kind of some fluctuations overall, but a steady intensity expected to continue throughout the afternoon. You can see it's kind of wrapping up once again. At times, Melissa has shown at least the idea of a concentric eye wall, meaning you have the strongest storms around the center, but then you get a secondary line of storms that's trying to kind of like battle and take over. So there's the opening up, but you can see in the last few scans, it's starting to come back together. So we'll continue to watch the structure of the storm as we go throughout the day today, but overall the message is that Melissa is a powerful hurricane and is going to continue to remain that way as we approach the landfall time frame on the island of Jamaica. Here's another view on our visible satellite, just giving you an idea of the structure of the storm, right? So we have these intense bands wrapping up around the center of the storm. Boy, you can see that eye popping up on satellite. That's closer to the surface of the storm, right? That's where our low pressure is. Also, what's interesting is on this satellite view, we can actually see what we consider the venting of the storm upstairs at the highest levels. You can see we have at least some outflow of our winds doing something like that in that circulation. That's actually the high pressure that is venting the storm aloft to allow that convergence of the rush of air and energy into the center. We are expecting a low wind shear environment to continue for Melissa. It is slowly moving to the west as it's trapped under a narrow mid-level ridge of high pressure. High moisture content is going to continue to get thrown up across not just the island of Jamaica, but Haiti and the Dominican Republic, where unfortunately we've already had pretty extensive flooding and loss of life. The warm water temperatures, that remains the story of where we're going to continue to see the intensity of this storm. Is the opportunity to reach Cat 5 on the table? Absolutely. As we go through the night tonight, expecting to see the intensifying Melissa continue. Then you'll notice as we get past Monday into Tuesday, we start to lose the intensity. The reason being is once we start to see this landfall, which is expected right now about early Tuesday morning in the latest forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center with Hurricane Melissa, Jamaica does have some mountainous terrain. And you'll see here we go from a major hurricane weakening as we move over eastern Cuba, and likely because we have that mountainous terrain, peaks upwards of 300 to 7,500 feet, and that does disrupt at least some of the structure of the storm.
All eyes on Hurricane Melissa as it threatens to be one of the most intense, devastating hurricanes on record in Jamaica. Here's a look at conditions on Sunday in Kingston. Now, right now, mandatory evacuations are in effect for some areas as this hurricane could bring widespread flooding, landslides, and destructive winds. Melissa is just, one of those storms where you see it intensifying the way it has. As a meteorologist, your heart just drops. Winds at 175 miles per hour as of the latest update. Strong Category 5 storm, and of course, as we know now, making a beeline directly for Jamaica, and will be making landfall late tonight, early Tuesday morning as a very strong storm, and even before that, causing many problems. Now, hurricanes are classified by categories 1 through 5. Hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knabb explains how the Saffir-Simpson wind scale system works.
A Category 5 hurricane. That got your attention, right? Well, we all know that a Category 5 tops the scale, but do you know just how strong a Category 5 really is? The Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale is divided into 5 categories, but that's based solely on the wind speed. It all starts when sustained winds reach 74 miles per hour, a Category 1 hurricane. Increase those winds and climb the scale to 157 miles per hour or greater, and that's when a hurricane is designated Category 5. While there's a big difference in the wind speeds between a 1 and a 5, the difference in damage is far greater. Wind damage increases exponentially with a hurricane's winds, which means that Category 4 winds are actually 250 times more destructive than a Category 1 hurricane. This is also why nearly 90% of all hurricane wind damage comes from Category 3 or stronger hurricanes. But don't let that lull you into a false sense of security the next time a Category 1 or even a tropical storm approaches your area. It's the water by far that's the deadliest threat from a hurricane, not the wind. That's why we tell you to hide from the wind, but run from the water. Because while winds are important, there's a lot more to a hurricane than just its category.
Important information there. And, I think when we talk about the water being much more damaging than the wind, it's quite often when you're talking about maybe winds that aren't reaching Category 5, 175 mile per hour winds at any given time, like we see with Melissa right now.
Yeah, like Dr. Knabb said, the winds go up exponentially as far as the destruction goes. It's not like a Category 2 is 2 times stronger than a Category 1. Right. It's 10 times stronger. Category 3, 50 times. Category 4, 250 times. And here in Jamaica, we could be dealing with a Category 5, which is 500 times stronger than a Category 1.
Now, can we hope that maybe we will see something like an eyewall replacement or something like that? We would take it down, but we are still having the forecast of a Category 5 leading right up to landfall overnight tonight into early Tuesday. And, a lot of focus on Jamaica, as there should be when you have a storm like this barreling down, but even that major hurricane landfall there in eastern Cuba across the Turks and Caicos, southern Bahamas could be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's been moving so slowly, but we're talking about less than 48 hours from now, making it into the Turks and Caicos and portions of the southern Bahamas. And then after that, eventually maybe even grazing portions of Bermuda. So a lot to break down. Of course, the winds are only going to be going downhill. We've only seen gusts up near tropical storm force. It is causing power outages already. So people already in the dark have no idea, what's ahead of them. But they know the forecast, and it looks very intense, if not scary, here for portions of western Jamaica.
When you're talking about all the rain that we've already seen from the outer bands and this duration of winds that we're going to be stuck in, that's when you really do start to see trees coming down, the landslides, the power outages, all of that becomes more of an issue. And then, of course, Chris, it's a matter of the direction of the winds as well. We've been talking a lot about the potential for storm surge here. Initially just on the south side of Jamaica.
Yeah, and it's going to vary. Not the entire coastline is going to see surge because some of this is very rocky coastline, but it's where you have those beaches, those low-lying spots. That's where we'll get that runoff of water. Also, remember, it's very mountainous terrain, so you dump a foot, 2 feet of rain. All that's going to be power outages in the southwestern portion of the island, and it's just wait time now. Power outages in the southwestern portion of the
Melissa, a powerful and extremely dangerous Category 5 hurricane, packing 185-mile-per-hour winds and taking direct aim at the southwest section of Jamaica.
Areas outside of the eye will also see significant impacts, as Melissa will be the strongest hurricane ever to hit the island.
The graphic looks like it's a tornado.
Well,
it might as well be.
It might as well be, you know,
Yeah.
about this kind of wind that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, a long duration, too. It's been excruciating watching this along the coast.
And in recent hours, as you guys were pointing out, it did take a little bit of a jog to the left. And the coordinates now plotted by the National Hurricane Center, it's almost like it's paralleling the coast. It's just a little wobble. It's going to make it inland soon, but it hasn't yet made landfall. This is prolonging the worst weather right along the coast, isn't it?
It really is. And you know what? It's not weakening either. Not that it's going to spend a lot of time over land to have opportunity to weaken, but any time over water, we know it's been strengthening, and it's not showing signs of not strengthening.
Yes, it does not look like it has made landfall yet, guys. Thank you very much. Let's have a look at the most recent advisory issued by the National Hurricane Center at 185 miles per hour. Lots of data was taken this morning from reconnaissance missions, both from NOAA and from the Air Force, suggesting that it was perhaps instead a 200-plus mile per hour hurricane, but it doesn't matter. A few miles per hour on either side of that. Not much is going to be able to withstand that. Trees will be leveled, and much of the infrastructure, unfortunately, where those kinds of winds are, will also likely not survive. Pressure down around 892 millibars. This is basically as low as it gets. It's among the very lowest pressures ever observed. But just remember, the lower the pressure doesn't necessarily mean explicitly the stronger the storm. It depends on how that pressure is spread out, what the gradient is really like. Because this is such a small storm, this 892 millibars is exceptionally noteworthy, telling us that, yes, indeed, these kinds of extreme winds over 200 miles per hour are likely going to make it inland in some very localized areas. It is moving north-northeast, although this most recent, it's a wobble. You can see it right in there. This real, and that matters. We talk about wobbles sometimes not mattering. In this case, with a landfall, with such a tight contrast in weather conditions in just a few miles, a wobble matters, and that's what's happening right now. I do want to point out the most recent reconnaissance mission by NOAA earlier, about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours ago now, when they were passing through the south eye wall with a GPS dropson, those instruments they dropped from the plane from about 10,000 feet, measured a wind of nearly or just over 250 miles per hour at an elevation of only 250 meters off the surface, so less than 1,000 feet off the surface. The wind was over 250 miles per hour. Now, you might think, okay, that's just kind of a gust, right? Well, it's a bit more than that. It's not really a sustained wind, but it's a bit more than a gust. And that very same dropson, when it hit the surface, was documenting or measuring winds at around 200 miles per hour. So there's a whole lot of evidence to suggest this is a 200 mile per hour hurricane. But again, that kind of detail doesn't matter. We're dealing with a very, very, very intense hurricane with a lot of lightning. Those are those red squiggles in there, indicative of intense convection or thunderstorm activity, and very likely little mesovortices inside of that eye wall, bringing even localized damage beyond that you would otherwise get. Very, very impressive satellite picture indicating that we are probably not at landfall. It's always hard to call when you look at a satellite. There's sort of angles and stuff you have to deal with, and it's not exactly true, but it does appear that the center of circulation, let's say it's somewhere here in the middle. It's not always in the middle, but somewhere in there, probably not yet made landfall. We are waiting the call from the National Hurricane Center. It has not happened yet, but keep in mind destructive winds are occurring now inland. I do want to point out the radius of hurricane force winds pretty much has all along been about 25 miles, which is right about here. So all the hurricane force winds are confined within that sort of circle. Now, the intense winds of wind gusts potentially near and over 200 miles per hour are very likely somewhere, let's see if I can find a good color, right in about that zone, right in there in a narrow little corridor, right on the inner edge of that eye wall. So those extreme winds are thankfully felt over a tiny little location, and the hurricane force winds really only extend outward about 25 miles. So once you're outside of that, yeah, the weather's bad, a ton of rain, flooding, all the above, but the destruction from the sort of buzzsaw effect is not ongoing outside of that radius. But heads up, meaning if you live up in here along the North Shore, Montego Bay, Negril, guess who's coming? The worst of Melissa is on the way. With whatever's left of the eye wall, it will degrade somewhat over the complex terrain of Jamaica, but it will bring some very bad weather that way. And part of the reason why we have Melissa, not just because the water's warm, but the heat content in the ocean is so very high.
Got some new video in from Montego Bay, Jamaica. You can see one umbrella turned upside there. The wind very consistently and persistently blowing. This was taken by Sam Deans, and we had the chance to talk with him earlier about conditions, and he described very strong tropical storm force winds at this point. And you can see it, actually. And the problem with this is it's so persistent. You never get a break. The trees never get a break. In one view here, I saw, there it is, there's one tree down. We are going to get into some of the worst of it here in Montego Bay, watching the track of Melissa as it's approaching the coast right now. Make that track along the west central portion of the island in Montego Bay on the north side.
So there it is right now, that southwestern portion of the island, no doubt catching the brunt of the destructive winds, the storm surge as well. That's going to be another problem here for us coming into places like Black River. That's a zone really catching it right now. So as we get in a bit closer, there you can see there's Black River there. And again, right on that kind of eastern edge of the eye wall. Again, that full southerly wind driving that water right on into the Black River Bay. And again, very strong winds. Now, when it comes to this system, the strongest of the winds are kind of tightly compact here right around that center, not too far, around 30 miles or so. So as you work your way to the eastern half of the island, sure, there's going to be strong wind gusts, tropical storm force here and there, but no doubt the most destruction is expected there in the western portions of Jamaica. Also dealing with the rain. That's another part of the story, too. Heavy downpours, and we've seen some of that already, even outside of now with the system coming ashore. Heavy rain is expected through the rest of the day. There's a corridor here in the central portions of the island looking for 8 to 12 inches of rainfall in a few spots. So that's certainly a possibility. Widespread 5 to 8. When it's all said and done here, when it all adds up, we could see some spots here. We'll get into the higher terrain. Nonetheless, some spots that could see 30 inches of rain when it's all added up. Well, that's a lot of rainfall. So flooding is a big concern, along with, of course, the very strong wind. So let's follow the rainfall here as we work our way through the rest of the day. So the future radar shows you there's the center of the circulation continuing to move across the island of Jamaica. And then eventually, as we move our way to basically later on this afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, that center begins to emerge here out over the waters again. And then now we've got to deal with the heavier rain approaching and coming across the eastern portions of Cuba. Now, we watch out because could we see maybe a little bit of a tail kind of develop here and impact us here? Big outer band coming across western parts of Haiti. That's a real possibility. And within that, there could be some very heavy rainfall that we do potentially have to track there. But overall, the core moving across Cuba. This is now Wednesday early morning, now 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Then that begins to move over the waters before coming into parts of the Bahamas. So Wednesday late morning through the afternoon, they now have to face the brunt of this system. Now at that point, a bit weaker, but still a hurricane at that point. At least that's in the forecast there coming across the Bahamas. Storm surge, that's going to be an issue. How about here across the southern coast of Jamaica? 9 to 13 foot storm surge a possibility. And don't sleep on that north coast as well, because that's a zone that could also see some strong winds coming out of the north, driving in that water. 6+ foot storm surge there. And Cuba also could be looking at 7 to 11 foot storm surge on that south coast. So, Jen, once we get through in Jamaica, Cuba certainly next in line.
For the surge as well as the wind and the rain. The rain will be intense, 8 to 12 inches of rain, especially in that corridor of where we'll see the hurricane track. That's where we're going to have the biggest uplift of air, the biggest rainfall rates. That's going to be right in this corridor here across west-eastern portions of Cuba. But look, we're going to get some heavy rain all throughout in that eastern side of the circulation as it pushes onshore. That onshore wind interacting with the terrain here in Cuba will make the rain that much heavier. Let's talk winds. And in Guantanamo, we're going to start to see the winds increase as we get through late tonight. This is about 9 o'clock. We're seeing now Melissa approach the coast here in Cuba. It's going to be increasing in speed at this point. Winds expected to be about 50 to 60 miles per hour, but for an extended period of time, which could create some damage. I'm certainly concerned about that. The worst of the winds will be at the core of the hurricane as it moves up here through the central part of Cuba, exiting on the other side by early tomorrow morning. That was about 6 a.m. And then after that, we've got the Bahamas. the central and southern Bahamas that we are watching. So let's look at that perspective. So this is today. We're going to be, as we get through late tonight into tomorrow morning, start to see conditions go downhill here. And here we go, Duncantown, 90+ mile per hour winds, Clarencetown, 100+ mile per hour winds. This is from early morning to mid-afternoon. You can see how quickly things are moving through here. And because it's moving faster, it's more of a glancing blow than what we're seeing in Jamaica, where it's just sitting there right now. Here it's been excruciating landfall, but still 100 mile per hour winds in Cockburn Town is going to be intense and potentially be quite damaging. That moves through as we get to tomorrow night. This is now 11 o'clock, and now it's over the Atlantic. We do expect some weakening. The jet stream is going to help it accelerate more in its path, but Bermuda is in sight, so we have to keep an eye on this in Bermuda. We could be dealing with a Category 1 hurricane at this point as it's moving in this direction. Again, Hurricane Melissa right now bearing down, making landfall on the island of Jamaica.
It's only going to get worse as we get to the next several hours on the north coast of Jamaica.
Yeah, now Kingston, outside of the worst of the winds, but in the tropical storm force conditions, the heavy rain, and it's been so persistent here.
Let's bring in Dr. Postel. You're watching this hurricane, Dr. Postel, and
looks like we got a landfall.
Oh, it's official. There we go.
It's coming in literally as we speak.
Yeah, there it is. It's a Category 5 hurricane. Pressure the same, 892, 185 mile per hour. This is Category 5 landfall in western Jamaica. This is just now hot off the presses from the National Hurricane Center. As Alex and Jen so accurately discussed, landfall is kind of a process, right? But the actual designation of the time that it occurs is where the center of circulation crosses the coast. And that's not always in the center of the eye. Sometimes it's offset a little bit. They do their best to figure that exactly where that is. But yeah, landfall has occurred 25 miles southeast of Negril, Jamaica. So that's what we're dealing with now, a landfallen tropical cyclone, but destructive weather is ongoing, especially in the eye wall, which is carrying those wind gusts over 185 miles per hour. I'll show you some of the observations, which if you're just tuning in, are going to blow your mind on how intense this was. Hurricane reconnaissance in there earlier. In fact, one of the missions, the Air Force had to turn around, basically. They came in earlier. This was about 4 or 5 hours ago. They came in on the inbound pass, and they encountered extreme turbulence, the kind that they're like, you know what, we better check the plane on this and not do any more. So they circled around the eye for a little bit and then went back home. Air Force reconnaissance mission, remarkable stuff that they did, clearly encountering significant Gs that were near the or exceeded the Air Force or the plane limit. So that was what was going on hours ago, and this is what we're dealing with now, landfalling conditions. By the way, Kingston, Jamaica over here, there's a live shot right there on the bottom left of what Kingston, Jamaica looks like. Yeah, the winds are 20 to 30 miles per hour. Very heavy rain, exceptionally dangerous flooding conditions, especially inland, Kingston, Jamaica. But that's on the east part of Jamaica, eastern half, where the weather is really, really not anywhere near as bad as it is right near that eye. So let's go and have a closer look at what's going on inside of that and talk about the reconnaissance mission, not the Air Force recon that I mentioned that had to turn around and go home, but a NOAA plane just after that actually came in, I believe, on a path like this, and in the south eye wall, with their GPS drop wind sondes, measured a wind of 252 mile per hour, essentially a gust, but not that far off the ocean surface, only 250 meters off the ocean surface. So just above the deck, the winds were way over 200 miles per hour. And it's not exactly a gust, but it's not exactly a sustained wind. It's kind of somewhere in between. I do believe Melissa, prior to making landfall, was a 200 mile per hour hurricane. And whether or not it's plus or minus 20 miles per hour, it doesn't matter. That kind of wind in that kind of a zone is going to experience or going to create extreme, complete destruction. This is what we have now in the visible satellite pictures. You can see I also put on the lightning strikes in there, intense convection in the eye wall. The weather is unimaginable, really, in the eye wall, kind of inconceivable type of wind. We're getting some video coming in, but those are not in the worst of all conditions that are now certainly impacting parts of Jamaica, but in a very small radius. And what do I mean by that? Guys, hurricane force winds extend outward only about that far. Outside of that, we're not seeing hurricane force winds. Bad weather, extremely heavy rain, and all the trappings that come with a landfalling tropical cyclone in mountainous terrain is, of course, ongoing. But the hurricane force winds are tiny in that zone, within about 25 miles away from the center, along radii that look about like that in all different directions, right? Now, the high-end winds that we're talking about, way over 100 miles per hour, perhaps gusts over or near 200 miles per hour, are occurring only in a tiny, tiny little area, probably even just offshore, right in that zone, probably west of Black River in that zone. So in a very, very, very small area, literally half a mile from one place to the next can make all the difference and drop you one category on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That's the kind of gradient we're talking about. But that means those of us up here in Montego Bay, Falmouth, and as far west as even Negril, conditions are going to be getting worse. I do not believe the hurricane force winds have yet reached those regions, but the weather conditions are going downhill very fast with an increasing onshore north wind. This is a problem. This is going to lead to coastal flooding, surge effects, and the like as Melissa continues to cross Jamaica during the coming hours. Now you wonder how we got here. Well, of course, the atmosphere played a huge role in getting us Melissa, giving us the incipient circulation and moving it into the preferred spot here. But also, the oceanic heat content is the highest pretty much in the Western Hemisphere, and you could argue maybe even near the entire world. That we are seeing not just the warmth of the water, but the depth of that warm water, providing the fuel for these tropical cyclones. And it is above average in this area. It's not only the highest typically here, but we're also seeing heat content that is above average. And that has helped supply the fuel for Melissa to attain those incredible heights. So, Alex, we are dealing with the landfall now, and it is only going to get worse for many locations in Western Jamaica.
Yeah, this no doubt on the upper echelon when it comes to hurricanes. Recapping here now, a landfall. If you're just joining us, the landfall happening in 1 o'clock hour near New Hope, Jamaica. They're in the southwest portion of the island as a Category 5 hurricane with winds 185 miles per hour, central pressure at 892. This now tying the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 as well as Durian from back in 2019. It's the strongest landfalling hurricane here in the Atlantic Basin. So this is tops indeed. And, you know, you really, really hate to think about what we're going to see in the aftermath when this thing eventually is out of here and has crossed Jamaica here. The damage and destruction is going to be pretty immense. That's from the wind. How about the rain? That's going to be adding up, and it has been adding up, right? But what's left to come, we got a little bit more to deal with here. The zone right there where we're picking up here, anywhere in that orange, another 5 to 8 inches, and you get into some of the higher terrain. There could be even some higher totals locally. So certainly double digits possible. And when it's all said and done, I guess this is on top of what we've already seen. There will be some spots that see 20, 30 inches of rainfall getting a chance to add up. So for the rest of this afternoon, the core of Melissa continues across Jamaica. Now, even outside of that, remember, this is around 2 o'clock. The core is still here over Jamaica. But look, there's some heavy rain coming into eastern parts of Cuba, and that's only going to increase as we move our way on into later this evening and into tonight. By about 6 or 7 o'clock now, the center looks like it should be at this point north of Jamaica, but now we're starting to see it approaching eastern Cuba, and that landfall takes place as we move into later tonight. Heavy rain, very strong winds, of course, will be having an impact there. And we'll have to watch out. Could we see maybe a little outer band, a little tail developing here coming across western parts of Haiti? There could be some big rainfall totals adding up with that, with the rainfall rates that get pretty high. Then we move into our Wednesday morning. Now we see it emerge over the north coast of Cuba and approach the Bahamas. Central parts of the Bahamas, southeast Bahamas as well could get into some very heavy rain. So a lot of rainfall, that's going to be an issue. And storm surge, also something that we'll have to watch out for as well. 9 to 13-foot storm surge, that is likely here along that south coast of Jamaica, particularly as you work your way just east of where the center is making that landfall. We got to watch out there. And then also the northwest coast, as we see those winds coming in onshore here out of the north, that'll also cause some issues in terms of storm surge, 6+ feet. That's a possibility there. And the Cuban coast, the southern coast of Cuba, as we watch Melissa move in that direction, watch those winds coming in out of the south, piling up that water. could be in the order of 7 to 11 feet when it comes to storm surge there. So, Jenna, just a lot of impacts when it comes to the wind, the rain, and, of course, the surge, too.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's going to keep going to past Jamaica. We've got people in other island countries making preparations to get ready for the storm. In Cuba, officials are using tractors to position tanks of drinking water ahead of time. They're also clearing streets and dredging canals to help mitigate some of the worst of the flooding impacts. Rainfall totals here are expected to be in the double digits, possibly widespread totals of close to 2 feet. That is a possibility, and it's already been raining up here, and we're about to get more. So let's look at what we're dealing with. We also know that hundreds of non-essential U.S. service members also getting moved out of harm's way from Cuba to the U.S. More than 80 personnel and their families flew from the naval station in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to Pensacola's naval station over the weekend. Families as far away as the Turks and Caicos are also getting ready for what's coming. Emergency managers here deployed assets across the 6 islands. They are urging people to secure their property and review emergency plans because impacts are likely in the next 24 hours. I will take you into that track for Turks and Caicos. First up, though, I want to look at the rainfall in Cuba. The flooding is definitely a big concern. We've got rainfall that will be double digits, 8, 10, 12 inches of rain, especially here in the middle eastern part of the island here. So not quite central Cuba, but just east of there is where the heaviest of the rain will be. Definitely exacerbated by the mountains. We'll get some heavier totals because of that. And we will also see some strong winds as Melissa comes through. Now, it won't be as strong as it's approaching us in Jamaica, but it's going to be pretty strong when it approaches the coast here, probably Category 4. And we're going to be watching that later tonight, overnight, into tomorrow morning is when it emerges on the other side of Cuba. So the worst of the weather here coming after dark, which is always a scary time to get that worst of the wind. Then as we look at the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, we are on the outer edge, the projected path now, and there's a lot more certainty in this when you look at this range just because of the steering that's in place. Don't expect a lot of deviation from this. We're going to get the brunt of the worst of the wind and the conditions here coming through the south central Bahamas. So we've got Crooked Town, one of the spots that we're watching. Winds could be 100 miles per hour. Cockburn Town, winds could be 100 miles per hour. It's blasting throughout the day tomorrow, and by evening, it has emerged out over here to the east or northeast of the Bahamas in the Atlantic Ocean, and the next stop to watch out for will be Bermuda. The steering flow, which has been so important, is this big trough up here, which is affecting your weather over the east coast of the U.S. But that trough is what's picking it up. It's going to keep it out to sea. Again, no direct impacts to the U.S. Bermuda heads up. We may be dealing with a Cat 1 hurricane. This is from near the landfall area in Black River, Jamaica.
And as you can hear it, the wind's screaming. You can see the winds, those trees swaying around out there as well. And, you know, as bad as this is, no doubt there are areas that experience even 10 times worse than what you're looking at right there.
Yeah. So I don't know how fast those winds are, but I know those are not anywhere near Category 5 winds. But look, the weather, this was about, we think, 2 hours ago.
Right.
In an area that would have probably eventually gotten into the eye wall. Maybe they were just entering it here. Could have been the outer eye wall where there are probably Category 1 winds in there, maybe Category 2. I don't know how strong these winds are, but nowhere near the worst of it. Nowhere near.
When you see damage from the kind of hurricane that we were dealing with here, 185 mile per hour winds, 892 pressure. The surge is often what kind of flattens everything. And so the area near Black River it's kind of a concave coastline there. And so there's likely to be some surge damage. We haven't seen anything from that yet.
And it might be a while before we even get that, right? First of all, we got to get the hurricane out of here first. Then, of course, we get into the nighttime, so you don't get a chance to see that power situation. How do you even get images out of that zone? It could be a while before we know the extent of what is going on there in Southwest.
The forensic, on-the-ground forensic analysis is going to be very interesting to see exactly where the worst surge was and where the worst wind damage and all the like was. There's going to be a lot to uncover in the coming days. And weeks even, for that matter.
Yeah, so will we see any weakening? You know, when we see a hurricane over land, we always look for that potential, but it doesn't spend much time over land.
I think with the nature of this terrain over western Jamaica, you know, there are hills and mountains over 1,000 feet in altitude. That will substantially disrupt the circulation. So the winds aloft will still be howling, but right near the surface, we're going to see a lot of, well, I would say,
disruption, maybe is the best way to put it. Yeah.
Disruption, yeah. It's still going to be very powerful by the time it makes it to the North Shore. And on the sort of western edge, by that time, we're going to have winds coming in like that are going to be very powerful into places like Montego Bay, where we're going to see likely winds over gusts over 100 miles per hour. Now, maybe not the extent of the kind of wind that we saw right in the inner eye wall prior to landfall, but still very bad weather on the North Shore.
And that's to come, right? South Coast is dealing with now that North Coast. That's the area that is lined to deal with it before long. And it's right in that core where Dr. Postel, the worst is going to be felt, where, you know, you may be looking outside. You got that shot there in Kingston in the bottom left of your screen.
Yeah.
It'll go gusty, some rain, but you're far enough removed from the most intense winds.
Far removed. I just looked at the most recent observation. The wind was at about 22 knots, which is 28-ish miles per hour there. Certainly very heavy rain. Jen and Alex, you guys have been rightly mentioning the danger that is accompanying the landfall of Melissa all across the island, with flooding rain, catastrophic amounts, perhaps of feet of rain. But by far and away, the most destructive weather is confined to this area. This is about where the hurricane force winds are. Now, it's changed a little bit now that it's over land. But once you're outside of that, the winds radically go down. And the most dangerous of all the winds are likely right in, let's see, let me get a better color for that, right in about here. That inner edge of the eye wall is where you could see those winds at that Category 4 and Category 5 gust strength.
So as we watch this move out over Jamaica, it's unfortunately moving across the, well, fortunately, the skinniest part of Jamaica. But it's not going to spend a lot of time on land.
Yeah.
The ocean conditions on the other side are still very warm. Not as warm, though. It was sort of in that sweet spot south of there.
Yeah, they are. I have a one model's interpretation of how Melissa's going to cross over Jamaica and reemerge over the Caribbean. And this is, again, a guess, essentially a model's guess of what it's going to look like. Hard to know as it moves over Jamaica. But look, Montego Bay, Negril, many other locations are going to see an onshore wind with coastal flooding. And here we go. It may strengthen a little bit again before it goes over Cuba, likely tonight.
So some new video in from Montego Bay, Jamaica, still well out ahead of some of the worst of the conditions which are on their way to Montego Bay. But you can see tropical storm force conditions. It is going to get worse and very soon, actually. So we need to talk more about that.
Indeed, indeed. As you see, kind of those palms swaying around out there here. This is just kind of the appetizer for what is to come, with some of the strongest winds that are anticipated and the heavy rain that will continue.
Yeah, catastrophic winds expected to move in. And so let's take a look at what's happening out there. We want to actually go back to LSM Storm Tracker Sam Dienst. He is in East Montego Bay. We spoke with him earlier today. Sam, thanks for staying with us. How have things changed for you? And especially now, have you noticed a big ramp up of the winds?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a big ramp up of the winds in the past hour or so. Very strong easterly winds here. The room where I'm located is on the third floor, balcony facing west, so I am protected and have been able to watch the sea rise, probably 3 feet or so additional. We've had some roof paneling fly off, broken tree limbs. I just had a gazebo collapse probably 5 minutes ago. I have a building two buildings down from me that is losing some roofing panels right now. So yeah, that's where we're at. I know the eye wall is getting pretty close.
Yeah, it appears to be closing in on you, Sam. This is, again, Greg Postel. Got a question for you. Do you have any instrumentation with you, whether it's any kind of anemometer device or maybe even a pressure monitor to get a sense for how bad weather the meteorology is going to get where you are?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I did bring a handheld anemometer with me, and it appears the battery has gone out on that. So, unfortunately, I don't think I'll try it again, but I don't think that's going to be working, unfortunately.
And Sam, where you are there at the resort, I imagine there are others who are there as well. What have they been told to do here as this hurricane closes in?
Yeah, just shelter in place. You know, hold tight. Stay in your room, away from the glass windows. Go to the bathroom. Is the safest place in the hotel room. There is a security team on site, and you know, if people are moving throughout the resort, they're telling them to go back. But nobody's out here moving around in this wind right now. So.
Did the resort do any communication about the fact that you could get into the eye, which would allow for some calming winds? And I worry that people would go out during that time, especially considering the next eyewall has to come through.
Correct. Yeah, there really hasn't been much communication on that. I've been trying to warn people that that I'm running into and talking to here, how the situation will change abruptly, especially with the wind from the complete opposite direction if the eye does indeed pass over us. So, example, the room I'm in now is a west-facing window, so I'll have to either move out of this room or just get in the corner of the room or go somewhere else. I have a couple of stairwell backup safety plans. I can ride it out in there. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Sam, it looks like I'm looking at the satellite data, and it looks like perhaps the eye wall is close to you, if not the outer edge of it, moving through parts of your region in and around Montego Bay, where you will begin to experience hurricane force winds. Did you get a sense yet if there's been a rapid increase in the wind speed associated with the approach of that eye wall?
Oh, I just heard a.
Maybe the answer is yes.
Maybe the winds have increased.
Yeah.
I mean, it only makes sense, right? It's moving northbound, and we're starting to get to that outer edge. So, yeah, conditions will continue to go downhill. Montego Bay, the Falmouth area. We talked to a couple of tourists in Falmouth that were unfortunately stuck because they couldn't get out. Flights canceled, and so those are spots where conditions are expected to deteriorate.
That is terrifying. There's going to be loss of communication for many on the island. Power will be out in all kinds of communication. Even the satellite links are going to be hard to come by, I think. So.
And that's what we see after Category 5 hurricane. I mean, this is, again, upper. We've talked about this all day, and it's just upper echelon. This is our third strongest at landfall when it comes to the Atlantic Basin.
Yeah, we just don't see it.
Yeah, we just don't see this.
So this is kind of we have to kind of see it as it plays out here. There you have it, tied now at number 3 when it comes to lowest pressures in the Atlantic Basin with the Labor Day hurricane of 1935.
This one to me stands out even among all of those because of its compact size. With that lower pressure operating on a much smaller scale, you can have much stronger winds in that case. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one brought its 200+ mile/hour winds inland.
Yeah, that's the thing. You look at that list, when those storms got down to that pressure and the strength that they were they impacting land at that point?
No.
Right. Not Wilma, not Gilbert. Yes to the Labor Day.
Right.
And that's what you can compare Melissa to.
Kingston, Jamaica experiencing some of the outer bands of Melissa. The wind whistling in those overnight hours, the strong rain bands beginning to fall, and there's hours of this still ahead.
All right, just the beginning of what is a complete disaster here in Jamaica. We're continuing to follow the latest on Weather Channel Live. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Meteorologist Felicia Combs and Chris Bruin giving you the latest information as the eye of Melissa, Hurricane Melissa, made landfall 3 hours ago or so, Felicia, but it's still over the island impacting Montego Bay right now.
the strongest landfall recorded on Jamaica. Melissa making landfall with 185-mile-per-hour winds. Chris, of course, we've gotten into the portion of the storm where everyone is hunkered down. You kind of stop seeing reports coming out because everyone is in their safe spot, and for the most part, communications are suffering. So keeping an eye on what is happening here, and we'll be bringing everyone the latest updates as we get them.
Yeah, and we've been talking to even people here on vacation, but as they try and give us updates, their communication has been totally cut, which is not surprising because the worst conditions are now impacting those areas like Montego Bay and the North Coast. 150 mile per hour, so it has weakened considerably from where it was by landfall, and that has to do with the land interaction. You can see the eye doesn't look nearly as well defined as it once was, so it's not that clear blue sky that we were seeing as it was moving onto Jamaica. It's emerging a little bit weaker, and the weakening trend will probably continue even as it pulls over water, but it's still going to stay a major hurricane because forward speed is going to start to pick up, and while pressure will slowly nudge upwards a little bit as this is still taking a punch here from land, by the time it gets to Cuba, this is still going to be a very dangerous major hurricane, whether it be a Category 4 still, or if it has weakened by that point to a Category 3. We're still talking winds in excess of 120, possibly 130 or more miles per hour for Cuba. So still a very destructive storm. You can see the enhanced satellite view over the afternoon starting around lunchtime. That's when it made landfall just before 1 p.m. And then that crossing over the west side of Jamaica with the western eye wall hitting Montego Bay and areas there on the north coast. In fact, the eye moving right over a community called Falmouth, where we were actually talking a couple hours ago with a tourist there who is in town for a wedding. They have lost connections. We haven't been able to get an update from them. But the worst is upon us. We are in the thick of it right now. And, you know, reports are trickling in here and there, but we're still not getting the full grasp of the situation. There's a look at the visible satellite, and you can see as it slowly turns across Jamaica, there's clouds now in the eye, so it has interfered, but it's still a very dangerous hurricane. The hurricane force winds stayed well to the west of Kingston, but they weren't spared from the rainfall, and it'll be interesting to see how catastrophic some of the flooding is. We've seen it in Black River, but other communities, I'm sure, are dealing with this rushing torrent of water, and that alone is, you know, just a terrifying situation to find yourself in, because you have, a lot of times may need to get out of your house, but then you got to expose yourself to those winds, and that is just super dangerous. As we go forward in time, winds are going to slowly decrease. They're still going to stay strong, though, through the rest of the day. So it's not going to be until daylight tomorrow before we really get a full scope on the destruction here. For Christiana, Jamaica, which is here in the central part of the island, up in the mountains, we're still talking about hurricane force gusts here as we go through the next couple of hours. After that, we'll start to see the winds come down. Rainfall amounts should start to come down, and it'll get more broken up as far as the steadiness of it goes. And Montego Bay, still looking at hurricane force winds for the next 2 hours. I would say after that, the worst is behind us. Surge still building there on Montego Bay and the north coast. And Felicia, this is going to continue to stay a concern through tonight.
Let's take a look at other places that have those warnings up. One of those places, the Bahamas, obviously Cuba and Turks and Caicos. Tropical storm warnings there in Turks and Caicos, still for portions of Haiti, and hurricane warnings for southeastern portions of Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas. We'll watch as those tropical storm force winds continue to spread across Cuba through the evening and into the overnight hours. That's when Melissa will be making landfall there in Cuba. And then throughout the day on Wednesday, conditions will deteriorate across the Bahamas and into Turks and Caicos. We'll see tropical storm force winds at first, and then that will pick up into hurricane force winds. With this, wind damage is possible, but also storm surge flooding as well as rainfall flooding across this region is going to be possible throughout the day on Wednesday. Today is really the day where you want to make sure you have all your preps done here across this region.
Update from the National Hurricane Center on powerful Hurricane Melissa. It's now back up to Category 4 strength. It's been amazing to watch this thing throughout the day, horrifying as well. The western side of Jamaica, we're going to start to see over the next few days some horrific damage there. I can guarantee that. They got a direct hit from a Category 5, 185 mile per hour sustained wind. Storm moved over Jamaica, weakened as it did, got down to a Category 3, and now it is a Category 4 once again with 130 miles per hour. I mean, this is really, it's quite fascinating to see how simple it is sometimes when it comes to tropical meteorology, at least in this sense. Storm is out over warm water with no wind shear. it gets really strong. It moves over the mountainous terrain, it loses strength. It gets right back over hot water, and it's just a small little channel that it has here before it gets to Cuba up here, and that was enough. The center of the storm is over warm water. It's just pumping fuel into it. It's that simple, honestly, and it was really just fascinating to watch the eye reemerge. I mean, look how it came off of the coast of Jamaica, well weakened. In fact, I'll even take you back the last 12 hours so you can see what it looked like before it hit the coast of Jamaica. Just an outrageously strong storm, and moves across Jamaica, the eye dies down, and now it has been putting itself back together. So this is going to be a big problem for Cuba, to say the least. Guantanamo Bay is right here. It does look like Melissa is going to come in pretty well west of there, but it's still going to put a solid storm surge in there. Tremendous amount of rain that's going on as well. There was one interesting feature here on the radar. May have some supercells going on right there. Those look like some supercells to me. Do you remember with Milton when we had a bunch of tornadoes that happened with the storm? This would be the part of the storm where it happens, right? On the east side, the southeast side. I'll give a shout out to Nick on Twitter. I'm not even going to try to say his last name for, that's how I found out about this. But yeah, then I just happened to have access to the radar here, so I wanted to point that out. Nick K. He's a meteorology student, and he's a very smart guy. Okay, so Cuba, Haiti, you guys are next in the crosshairs. Now, Cuba is going to take the direct hit, again, west of Guantanamo. Haiti's just going to get more rain, and this is all bad. I mean, Haiti's already had significant flooding over the last few days. There have been deaths because of the flooding, and now there's more rain on tap. You notice, let me show you the forecast cone here, and you notice where it is. Let me see if I can get some cities on here. Yeah, there we go. Well, apparently they don't want to show up. That's Guantanamo Bay right there. And it's the right side of the storm, the east side of it, where the storm surge is going to be the worst. Lots of mountains here, by the way, and then it's very flat over the rest of the country. So the mountains are going to make for more flooding and landslides like what we saw in Jamaica. All right, let's do a couple of questions here because we are getting a lot of them, and I really appreciate them. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some of these. I'm a South Floridian. I remember Andrew, Wilma, and Irma. Those storms would have weakened after landfall had the terrain been mountainous like Jamaica. The flat terrain of Florida, warm waters of the Everglades, and Lake Okeechobee added fuel to the hurricanes, and then it kind of trails off. Well, I'm going to partially agree with that, but here's the thing. Florida is also a spot where there's not in the case of Andrew especially, Andrew just came, Andrew came across here, and, it wasn't over land for that long. Yes, if there were mountains here, it would have weakened it a little bit faster. But at the end of the day, when a storm goes over land in general, it is going to lose strength. And yes, so once in a long while, you can have what is it called? The brown ocean effect. If the ground is super wet, like some of the Everglades, you see this sometimes in parts of Louisiana, even Texas, where a storm can actually maintain its strength as it moves inland. Once in a very long while, increase in strength, but most often when a storm gets over land, it's going to start to lose strength. All right, next question. Keith, does the stadium effect have anything to do with the force at which the eye wall spins? I'm going to be honest, I would not be able to answer that question. But luckily, a friend of the show, Andy Hazelton, literally tweeted out a perfect answer to this question not long ago, about 3 or 4 hours ago. Again, Andy's a great meteorologist. He's up in those hurricane hunters. He's a scientist on the plane. I did my thesis on eye wall slope. So it turns out there's a weak correlation between slope and intensity, but a strong one between eye size and slope. So basically, smaller hurricane eyes tend to be more vertical. So they look like this. And the rest of it says, he says, compare yesterday with a 10-mile eye, which would be more cylindrical, to today with a 15-mile eye, more sloped. So yeah, he's comparing the different forms of the eye. In fact, I can definitely go back and probably show you this. Hang tight. Let me get on the right graphic here. This is part of this format. You just got to wait for graphics sometimes. So hang tight. I'm going to find it for you. All right. So let's see if we can go back the last 48 hours. All right. Here we go. Nope. It's not having it. Sorry. Hold on. I do have a life cycle graphic, actually. I've got the whole life cycle of Melissa. So the idea is, yes, the size of the eye can actually play quite a role in whether it's like a cylindrical type of deal or more of a stadium effect. And as I understand it, did he say in that tweet, Chris, it was the the more vertical setup tends to be in like the stronger hurricanes. Yeah, weak correlation between slope and intensity. Okay, but he didn't specify whether it was stadium effect or cylindrical. So I guess I didn't read the tweet well enough. But either way, there's some information about eye walls and whether it's vertical or more sloped. Sorry, that's not my field of expertise. If it was severe weather, I would be doing okay on it. All right, this one is Chad. If we could rewind time 48 hours, what single variable change like ocean temp, shear, humidity might have prevented this from becoming a Category 5? Tough question to answer because how much shear am I allowed to put in it? You know, if it's like an unlimited amount, then you could just pick that. But given, let's say that we're going to pick something reasonable for ocean temp or wind shear or humidity. Ocean temp, hands down. That's what I would say. The problem with this area here is that it's been undisturbed all year. You know, there's some years where you have a couple different storms and we'll get some upwelling going. That's where you pull in the cool water from down below and pull it up to the surface, and then it just makes the sea surface temperatures cooler, which means, you know, not as much fuel for the storms. But there has been an uniquely large, or high amount, I should say, of ocean heat content, which means not only the sea surface temperatures are warm, but way down below, it's like the same temperature, you know, down to like, I believe it was like 50 meters or something like that. So even the violence of an incredible storm like this, you know, usually when a storm doesn't move very much, it tends to lose some strength because it brings up that cool water. In this case, it was just bringing up water of the same temperature, and that's why you saw yesterday. I mean, even as it was approaching land there, after moving slowly, it almost stopped and then made the turn toward the north. You ended up with a strengthening storm. So yeah, I would pick ocean temperature at the end of the day. Was that the last question? We got any more? Yeah. All right. Jared, what are millibars and why are they used to measure hurricanes? So yeah, millibar is just, it's just a unit of pressure, like anything, like inches, centimeters, or units of length. A millibar is just a unit of pressure. Technically, it's a hectopascal. If that makes sense. There are other units like atmospheres and stuff like that. What's another one? Inches of mercury, millimeters of mercury. You see all kinds of them. Millibar is just a short term for hectopascals. I don't know where the term came from, if I'm being completely honest, but it is an important number. And to put things in perspective for people, Melissa, as far as pressure goes, 892 millibars is one of the strongest storms that we have ever seen in terms of pressure in the Atlantic. Wilma, back at 882, was the strongest. And to put that in perspective, normal sea level pressure is about 1,013 millibars. A strong nor'easter would be like 970, maybe 960. So 892 is an outrageous number. All right, I want to get out to Robert Ray. He is on the north side of Jamaica. He made us a little video from earlier. He's sleeping right now, but check this out.
Look at this, guys. These are the winds, and by the way, this has been going on for hours, and you see the destruction here right now. The entire porch and all the sliding doors blown out. You see, look at all the debris on the ground. This is from trees, all of our supplies. This is food and water and things that we have here right now. And Jared Maloney, meteorologist, field producer behind the camera. Pete, photojournalist. We've got the camera kind of tucked over here so that we can keep things as safe as possible in case another gust comes through and sends out furniture or debris into this home. The winds are so strong and came in with such fury that I just want you to understand the explosion of glass and furniture and walls in here as Jared goes down and pants and looks in here. And look at that. I'm going to be very, very careful as we walk through. We have to maneuver through the water. It's all over the floor. It's slick. There's glass everywhere. This is a porch that leads out to the pool. We were doing live reports out there earlier today. Never thought that we would be in a position like this, certainly, especially with the turn that Hurricane Melissa made. It's like something out of a terrifying horror movie at this point. That we have not been into this room. My God. I was reporting live on Fox Weather when I heard the explosions in this room and the glass doors, and now that I see it, I understand why we heard that kind of sound. I mean, Jared, looking at this, showing the situation. My God, something just flew should probably leave as soon as possible. Let's go, guys. It is loaded with water. Careful. Go ahead, Jerry. We literally have an unraveling of this room as we speak, and we plan on giving all the information in the days ahead. I'm Robert Ray, Fox Weather.
Man, that wind, it just sounds so eerie. Listen to this video, by the way, out of Montego Bay earlier. Gust right there. I mean, it's like a punch. It's like a downburst on steroids. I mean, that's just more video out of Montego Bay. By the way, this is up on the northwest side of Jamaica. It's actually pretty far from where the eye gave a landfall, but it ended up pretty close to or in the eyeball on the west side of it as it was exiting. All right, guys, a lot more to come on, Melissa. Devastating day in Jamaica. We're going to be covering it over the next couple of days. We will do our best.
The strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in Jamaica, Hurricane Melissa, leaving parts of the country decimated. A trail of destruction in its wake.
Yeah, overnight the storm made a second landfall in Cuba. At that time, it was a Category 3. Next, it's going to bring impacts to the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, before heading towards Bermuda.
Here at home, the front kicking Melissa out into the Atlantic will bring us days of raw conditions. I'm talking rain, wind gusts over 40 miles an hour, cooler temperatures, and you might need to adjust your Halloween plans or at least grab a jacket and button down the hatches.
Maybe wear something underneath the costume for an extra layer. This is America's Morning Headquarters. Good morning, everybody. Jordan Steele, Steph Abrams, Jim Cantori's here as well.
We want to get you started with a look at the damage caused by Melissa. This is a scene in St. Elizabeth Parish. This is on the south side of the island where Melissa made landfall. Catastrophic winds. We're talking winds at 185 miles an hour. That's equivalent to an EF4 tornado. You had the surge, you can see the water there, and extensive damage, not only to this part of the island, but also on the northern part of the island, up by Montego Bay. They sustained significant damage.
Yeah, you can see power poles completely snapped here as folks kind of get out and assess the entire situation. They had several hours of hurricane force winds and just raw conditions, and now we're waking up to having to figure out what to do from this point forward. We got same area but a different view of the devastation with other video coming out of this western side of the country.
There it is for you. It is damage as far as the eye can see. Any trees that are still standing are stripped of all of their foliage, and it's look at that damage.
I can't tell if this is a neighborhood we're looking at or if it's some kind of commercial area where there are stores and businesses, because it's all just been demolished from the storm system that just wreaked havoc on everybody.
The Jamaican Prime Minister has declared the whole country as a disaster area. The Montego Bay Airport has been crushed. The Kingston Airport is set to open up tomorrow. First, they will allow aid in. So commercial flights, I'm not exactly sure when those will resume.
Right. Obviously, Jim, we get to this point where, folks are going to need help, obviously, going forward. We're still kind of in that situation, trying to assess to see if there's any other lives lost or anything like that.
We don't know how to get to the western side of the island yet. Did we lose infrastructure, roads, things like that on the way out there?
The flooding
we don't know,
was
because
outrageous.
this went over topography, so that's another issue. So this is all still coming to the realization, and it's going to take a couple of days before we see the scope of this. But yes, the western side of the island is going to need a lot of help from the eastern side, where they're going to be able to get things into the capital city of Kingston. So that's going to probably be where we all start this from. Well, it was interesting because yesterday morning we were watching this make its way in during the latter part of our show. We had those sub 900 millibar pressures. This morning we're actually going to watch it emerge from Cuba and head toward the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. But here's the first landfall near New Hope, Jamaica, Cat 5, 185-mile-an-hour winds. I can't wait to see the post report on this from NHC over the winter. Wouldn't surprise me if that went up. Not at all. Okay, 892 the pressure, tied for the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 for the third lowest pressure ever from an Atlantic storm. Incredible. So now it's going over Cuba. Okay, it's about in the central northern part of the southeastern part of Cuba here. There are very high mountains here. Okay, so that looks like it wrecked the eye again. But even when this reemerged as 120 and went back up to 130, so it actually intensified again before it made its way into Cuba, even though by time it landfall there, okay, it was still about 120 miles per hour. So we're still dealing with a major hurricane for all intensive purposes. It's moving northeast at 12, so this is moving twice as fast as it was yesterday at this time, okay? And you can see the hurricane hunters are in here. They're kind of flying the periphery of this. They're probably going to go around the outside and then turn to the left. And by time they turn left, the center will reemerge back over the water. So we'll be able to get a pretty good readout. But you can see how extended those tropical storm and hurricane force winds are, literally covering all of southern Cuba right now. Now, the obs aren't coming in. So I promise you we are not getting no gusts in Guantanamo Bay, because they're getting hammered right now, absolutely hammered. So let's take you up toward the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas, where the conditions this morning will go downhill rapidly as the center reemerges on the north side of Cuba there. You can see Duncantown, Cockburn, Clarencetown, Albertown. All these areas here in the southern Bahamas and the northern Turks and Caicos are going to get likely 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. This may go right over Crooked Island in the Bahamas. We'll see. You know, we'll see, because there's always like adjustments that this thing makes as it's moving on through. But by time we get to midnight tonight, this thing is gone and well on its way toward Bermuda. Rainfall will be heavy in some of these island locations. This thing's going to be moving a lot faster, though, than it moved when it moved over Jamaica. But look at Georgetown in the Bahamas. I mean, we're really going to be getting hammered as we work our way through the afternoon. High rain rates, and then things calm down about 10 p.m. Like I said, midnight tonight. This thing will be really pulling away very, very quickly. Same thing in Cockburn Town. We ramp up the morning. We go through the afternoon with a heck of a blow, and then during the overnight hours, we start calming it down again. Cat 3 likely emerging as a Cat 3 or minimal Cat 3, and then we go down through Cat 2 as it's moving. It will not intensify from this point on, but the damage has been done, and we still have a long way to go through the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas today.
We want to show you some of that damage. A tourist filmed her Montego Bay Resort after a Category 5, of course, Hurricane Melissa slammed Jamaica. She came up from the basement shelter to find the hotel wrecked. Water everywhere. The ceiling has come down. And I'm shocked they actually have some lights on. They must have a generator there, because we do know that power is out for a lot of people. But this is why when these hurricanes happen and you're in a hotel, they actually usually bring everyone down to one ballroom to keep everyone in one area and keep everyone safe, because windows could blow out in hotel rooms and some people might not be sure what to do. But that is just one video from Montego Bay. But I'm telling you, I've seen several more. I've seen video of the airport. That airport is not opening up for a while. Not for a while. It just got trashed from the storm. Montego Bay got hit very, very, very hard, if you know anyone in that area. There's our Cat 3 hurricane, as Jim mentioned. It's going to be a Cat 2, 110 miles an hour. A Cat 3 is 111, Cat 2 is 110. So we're still at high-end Cat 2, low-end Cat 3, but it will continue to go down Cat 2 and then make its way towards Bermuda, which can't get a break. We had Gabrielle, which actually kind of did a loop like this around Bermuda, but still got some wave action from it. Then there was Humberto. I should say Gabrielle passed the heat. Humberto did that loop, and then the eye of Imelda brushed the coast of Bermuda with sustained winds of 100 miles an hour. Bermuda does look like it could get some tropical storm force winds with this, but as we're going through the Turks, the Caicos, Bahamas, that's where we have the highest chance still of seeing those Cat 2 hurricane force winds. Low chance of hurricane force winds here into Bermuda. Of course, the Fishhook Island for us here under a hurricane watch. And this is an island of 64,000. And then, of course, a lot of tourists, a lot of people come here. Notice that as we go through the day on Thursday, that's when things go downhill. 30, 40 mile an hour winds Thursday night, 50, 60, 75. So we could gust here to hurricane strength. but the more sustained winds will be at tropical storm force strength. Continues early Friday morning. You can see the winds shifting as the storm passes by. And then as we head into the day on Friday, things will slowly taper off throughout the day. So if you have a trip planned to Bermuda, flying out tomorrow is probably going to be problematic, especially later in the day. I can't determine when they're going to close the airport and not have flights. But notice the storm goes to the north, but there are some showers that will be passing through Bermuda, not very many. This is Hamilton. Thursday, see, look at Friday. We don't have a lot of rain Thursday into Friday and really for the duration of it, but we do have some gusty winds lingering here into Friday. So not certain about how they will handle flights through the day on Friday. Notice at the top, Friday 1 a.m., we're at 59 miles an hour. And then through the day, we will just continue to see those winds go down. So that is a good thing as we head into our Saturday, Jordan. If you're planning to head over Saturday, things should be okay and things should be open and totally fine.
Yeah, and by that time, we'll get rid of our system as well because it'll be windy in the Atlantic. It's going to be, windy here on the home front as we've got a storm system, a developing low pressure system that is cruising across the mid-south right now.
Parts of the southeastern Bahamas, including Long Island, are covered in water today after Hurricane Melissa brought destructive storm surge to the area. We were watching the Bahamas yesterday, Turks and Caicos as well. Now, in Haiti, where we had a storm move close by, it was all about the water. Images like this continue to come in from Haiti, where bridges and roads have collapsed in the wake of Melissa's high water. Rain across parts of Haiti and the Dominican Republic left to rivers overflowing their banks, took down bridges, roads. There were landslides as well. So unfortunately, Dr. Nav, even areas that didn't see a landfall, weren't even close to landfall, still had the impacts.
Yeah, the days of rain in the very infrastructure vulnerable country of Haiti have caused those problems and the loss of life. And we saw how much water problems we had in the Bahamas yesterday with the storm surge, especially. Now, Bermuda, hurricane warning. We've got tropical storm force winds about to begin, and around 11 o'clock tonight till about 3 o'clock in the morning be the worst of it in Bermuda. Category 2 hurricane still, and it's really moving quickly now. And the wind shear is starting to get to it, but it's not going to weaken fast enough to spare Bermuda. And it's just now getting to sea surface temperatures below 80 degrees. So it's just not going to have enough time to fall apart until it gets much farther to the northeast. And even then, it's going to be a pretty potent post-tropical system. So you still are generating some new convection, even though the vortex is tilted northeastward because of the increasing wind shear. But thank goodness for this trough to keep this farther away from the east coast of the U.S. And people in Bermuda said, yeah, thanks a lot. We've had this happen to us multiple times this year. At least this will be passing a decent distance to the northwest as a Category 2 hurricane, but close enough that you're going to be getting some maybe hurricane force winds, especially in gusts, because you're going to be on the stronger side of the hurricane. So winds of tropical storm force starting any time now. And about 11 p.m. Bermuda time, 10 Eastern, is when the winds will really noticeably pick up. And the strongest winds may be around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning in Bermuda, and a couple of hours of really bad conditions, and then winding down as we get to the morning time. So you could still have winds clipping southern Newfoundland along the way. But right now, the winds are just about to start to be tropical storm force.